Tom has not responded to my request. I'm just going to simply ask for continuance of all zoning issues. I mean, it's an issue of fairness. Yes, there are people here, but how did they come here? They come here from the side. The residents said. Anyway, make a decision. It's a fair request.
I'll tell you this. I'll take it up.
Let's stand up and win.
But we're going to take this action tonight.
Okay, well, I will.
This is an advisory board.
That's fine.
And
I'll simply
this
describe.
does not.
This is a new, they changed the, I guess it changed from, this was what I printed out yesterday. And then this, so.
Mark? Yeah. Get his attention. Time has come and gone.
All right, good.
Okay, it's time to call on this meeting to order, but before we do, I want to ask anybody that's going to speak on a item that's on the agenda to please get a card from Mark there and put your name on it so we can.
That doesn't include the applicants because they're expected.
No, that does not include any citizen that wants to speak about an applicant's presentation. And we will limit those comments to 5 minutes unless there's a good reason to extend them. Okay. So at this time, I will call May 19th, 2016, Farragut Municipal Planning Commission meeting to order. The first item on the agenda, as always, is a citizen forum. Does anybody like to come up and speak on an issue that's not on the agenda? Oh, God.
Good evening. My name is Mike Mitchell. I live in Brixworth on Brixworth Boulevard. I want to talk about the new rezoning signs. I was unaware that we had a new sign. It looks a little bit like what we're seeing on the big screen now. It's white, and the text is the same light blue that you see, and there is green with the town emblem. I've been driving by this for a long time. I thought on Turkey Creek Road, where we're talking about an R2 to R3 upzoning, that it was a beautification award. I had no idea that it was a rezoning until I saw it in the Shopper News. I contend that if the town is to change something that we've done for 30 years, there should be some kind of notice so we understand. My further complaint on this is that the sign was on the walking trail, completely unreadable from the street. Now, when I first noticed the sign, we were in some of the cloudy weather, and I didn't really pay attention to the fact that the sign is practically invisible in bright sunlight. I've taken some pictures, and I've made a request of the chair to show them on the big screen. They have declined. I offer them to the press, and I'll provide them to any of you. But the point is, the sign's been laying on the ground more than it's been upright. It is not on a firm stake like our old use on review rezoning signs. And the sign says nothing about use on review. It says town action. Go to the website to find out. This is the same sign on Smith Road. I contend that, well, in my opinion, this is a disservice to the residents because we have no idea what's going on. I've asked for a formal opinion from the town attorney. Is this consistent with Tennessee Code Annotated, and is it consistent with the town charter? I wonder how many more people would be here for the rezonings tonight if they actually had knowledge that they were occurring. My request to the town is to do something about this. I've communicated with Mark, and he told me that we ran out of old signs because they were stolen, and I'm not sure if the nature of these signs is temporary or permanent. In my opinion, they don't meet adequate notice. And I think one of the most important things that a government does is about notice. I wonder how many people would be here if they had knowledge of what was happening in their community. So I urge the town to do something about this. I think it's unfair. We have multiple rezonings tonight. I urge you to change this, and if you don't go back to the old signs, at least have a sign that lets people know it's about rezoning, that it's legible from the street in an automobile, and why you would put it on the walking trail as opposed to near the street, I don't understand. But signs are something in this town that have been a sore point. We have the Farragut Business Alliance that created because they couldn't market themselves. They put signs out and the town removed them. After an election, the signs are removed if the candidate or their helpers don't remove them. But on Turkey Creek, this sign has spent more time on the ground than it has upright. I find that inconsistent with the other town procedures on signs. So I urge you to improve on this. Thank you.
Okay, I will comment on that a little bit because I had a conversation with Mark and earlier when he looked at the new sign, which it reflects the new marketing logo of the town of Farragut, and we had a discussion and decided that it did need some improvement. But at the present time, there was only one old sign left, period. So the sign that was used in this current iteration is all that's available until take another look at it.
Yeah, and that old sign has an inaccurate information and also doesn't include the town's newly adopted logo as part of its branding effort. So we were trying to update it. The sign that we have now is actually bigger than what we had. The lettering is actually bigger than what we had. We will certainly work on the placement of it, and we've only got a few of them because, like Mike said, they were stolen, our old ones. It's certainly not our intent that these things are not visible. We want them to be visible. They're not required, by the way. The only requirement under state law is that you provide notice in the newspaper of general circulation. We do that. We have our agendas and our full packet and all staff write-ups on the website. We have the TV channel. We send letters to all residents that abut properties that are considered for rezoning. None of that's required. So, but we certainly will work on improving the sign aspect of what he's talking about, because we want to make sure they are visible, of course.
Mark, our old signs, how did we stake them in the ground?
They were smaller signs, and that could be a problem with a slightly bigger sign, is that it can be a little more subject to the wind.
Okay, so maybe we should have a better...
One modification that we could consider, and we can take this through the Visual Resources Review Board, is maybe even making the sign a little smaller and making the logo a little smaller and the lettering bigger and thicker. So there's some things that we could do with the sign.
Okay.
But again, the sign is not required. The town has always provided those for rezonings, but
It's
and we
something
want to
we do.
continue
Yeah.
to do that,
Yeah.
I think. But we would definitely want to make sure that they're legible.
Mark, I've also had comments from various citizens, other than Mike Mitchell, that the signs are not very readable, especially in an auto.
Okay. Yeah.
And the darker print would be helpful. But my concern is that it doesn't say anything about a potential rezoning. I don't know if there's any intention of doing so, or if that's a universal sign. Is it that we...
Well, we keep those generic because they might not serve, they may serve for action other than just a rezoning.
Okay.
So there could be some other action that the public should be aware of, and all we're doing is alerting them to go to
Something's
the
going on.
town's website for further information. That's what we did in our original signs. So we're not changing that in any way. That way it gives it some flexibility. If there's an issue, then we put the sign out and people can call or go to our website and find out what the issue is.
Okay.
Maybe it could have, because it's so much larger, like an easel or something, you know, a prong to hold.
Yeah, like I said, we may go with a little smaller sign and try to make the lettering consume more of the face area. That'll make it a little more stable. But the lettering actually on the sign we have now that Mike was talking about is bigger than what we had.
Considerably bigger, actually. Considerably bigger.
Yeah, it's considerably bigger actually.
But I
than what
think
we had.
sometimes when you look at, I've heard this said when you have a dark background and white letters, it bounces off better than when you have a white background and dark letters. So that the change of that might be, and I have no idea what the proof of that, but perhaps the other signs were a little bit more visible
Well, I
because
think-
of the
yeah,
opposite.
and that'll be something we'll bring up with the VRB.
Okay.
They haven't been involved with these in the past, but it's certainly not a problem, and we can include it as an agenda item.
Okay.
But all that's good feedback, you know, for whatever modifications we make to those signs.
Okay, I think it's enough on that issue. Anybody else has anything to say, not direct associated with the agenda items? If not, we'll continue to the next item, which is approval of the agenda.
Mark, do we have any changes on that?
No.
I move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Move is approved, agenda is approved, and the next item is approval of the minutes for the April 21st, 2016 meeting. Again, I have a motion for approval.
I move to approve. Okay.
Betty seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay, our next item, discussion and public hearing on the site plan for Farragut Town Center. Parcel 137.09, tax map 142, zone C1/MUTC, located at 103 South Campbell Station Road, 2.21 acres. Paul Schaefer and Mike Channel and First Farragut Development are applicants. And this item is the result of, we basically approve site plans on that site some time ago, but the property was sold, and so we are going back through the process, and we'll have the applicant make his presentation, which is not much different than the original one.
Just as a little background to this, a few months ago, we amended our general commercial zoning district for the area that was identified as mixed-use town center in our comprehensive land use plan to provide for additional new requirements that would encourage a built environment that was more consistent with a downtown look and feel. And the property here at the corner of South Campbell Station and Kingston Pike is within that mixed-use town center area. And the applicant is proposing to demolish the existing former Silver Spoon building and parking lot and to create a new development that would have basically two buildings along the frontage of South Campbell Station Road with an outdoor patio area that could be shared between two of the buildings, and you know the buildings are brought up closer to the street. They have the appearance of being two-story. They're at least 75% face brick on all elevations. The applicant is proposing a bioswale in this area here. They have a pedestrian connection through here that ties into, basically this is a large outdoor seating area that ties into the sidewalk along South Campbell Station Road. The site lighting will be the decorative bell-shaped type lights that are required in the mixed-use town center. Let me go to the next slide here and show some of the building elevations. Well, this is the landscape plan. As you can see, it's will be heavily landscaped. This is the building elevations for the proposed buildings. As I mentioned, there's a smaller freestanding building on the north portion of the property, and then a larger multiple tenant building on the remainder of the development that are tied together with that outdoor kind of courtyard area. The buildings have the two-story appearance. There's the iconic tower on the building up close to Kingston Pike and South Campbell Station Road. The staff recommends approval of the site plan subject to the 8 comments that are at your places, none of which are, I don't think, significant or can't be addressed. The applicant is going to the Visual Resources Review Board next week for some sign ordinance amendments related to this project. So the recommendation from the VRB will be reported back to you all very likely next month. With that, I'll turn it over to the applicant if they have any, if you all have any questions of the applicant.
I'm Kelly Hedden with Barber McMurray Architects. If you have any questions, we're certainly to welcome them and try to answer them the best we can.
This is basically the final design.
This is the final schematic design. That is correct.
Since I'm relatively new here, I want to refresh my memory. All of the second floor is intended to be residential, is it? And the bottom floor?
No, ma'am.
office?
All of the second story is a high clear story window. It gives the appearance of a 2-story development. But similar to the previous site plan that you had approved, it is all a 1-story development.
Okay. I'm sorry I wasn't in
Oh, that's okay.
on that commission that approved the previous one. And it does appear to be 2-story. Thank you.
I've got one question. Could you go over the traffic flow through that
I'm happy to.
development?
Mark, would you mind backing up to, thank you, right there. There are 2 vehicular paths into the site. We're encouraging all of the drive-through. Matter of fact, it's one of the things we're talking to the sign review board about. We're encouraging all of the drive-through patrons to pass the first entry and go to the second, and then the stack line then will be along the back of the site. All of the patrons that are coming in to the other tenant space then would come into the main entry, circulate around the site. They can come back out without ever having to conflict with the drive-through. We have tried to separate vehicular paths and pedestrian paths to the extent possible. We think putting the drive-through path along that back site helps prevent as many pedestrian vehicular conflicts as possible. Having a separate crosswalk that is for use of 2/3 of the parking is a big benefit to that as well. The drive-through lane will be almost entirely hidden because of the steep slope that goes up toward Kingston Pike along the northern edge of the site. We're further using brick walls and landscaping to hide those elements to buffer the parking from all of the roads and to open both sides of the new development up for pedestrian traffic. I hope in all of that I answered the question you had.
Yeah, I think you've done a fairly decent job on that. It's not an easy thing to make work.
It's a very tight site, and it is driven by the number of parking spots and the square feet you want in it, so.
Have the tenants already been determined, or is that something that's, once the building is up, you'll put a lease?
They're in negotiation with their tenants currently.
Mark, would you circle the outdoor seating area again?
We would like to treat that as an urban courtyard. It is enclosed on the street side with a brick colonnade with gates so that they have to pass through it. And then it's open to the pedestrian traffic on the other side. But visually, you would be able to see in and out, and it would be a really nice activity area as you pass in the evenings.
Where is the brick colonnade?
It is the dark line. There's a short dark line on the north side, and then there's a line about 4 times as long. Market extends all the way up to that corner. There you go, all the way. That's the brick colonnade.
So that's not shown in the depiction of the building?
It is shown in the elevations, yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, it says it's 19 feet, 3 inches or something from Camel Station Road.
I'm sorry?
19 feet from Camel Station Road.
It meets the setbacks from the road, yes.
Do you not see that as a safety issue?
Okay, on the elevation. I'm sorry.
Oh, I see what he's saying, okay.
What's to keep, do you not see the seating area so close to Camel Station Road as a safety issue?
Well, the seating area is enclosed behind a wall, and we can enclose that with gates and fencing if we need. We would like it to be as open and inviting as possible. One of the desires of a downtown neighborhood district is to have people walk and be invited in and come in and out there. With restaurants and everything, we've got to manage that from a control standpoint. That will be part of our future submissions to you.
Okay, I think I see
I, for one,
the landscaping part. Thank you.
I, for one, am delighted to see this site redeveloped. It's been a lot of years, and there's been different proposals, and finally the economy is right for an opportunity here. So we very much welcome you and your developers to the town, and excited about this particular project. Hopefully it sets the bar pretty high for our MUTC district, and I'm really looking forward to it. I do have a question. And Mark might be able to answer this. Is the stormwater, is that grandfathered in on this site? Is that why we're not seeing any kind of stormwater detention facilities?
Well, some of it they're addressing in the bioswale, but there is off-site stormwater that was planned when that.
That next to the post office, is that where the regional detention pond
Yeah.
is? Okay, so all their stormwater heads over to that
Yeah.
by the post office.
Yeah, Horn Properties developed all that many years ago, and they created basically that regional area for detention for all those parcels, like Edison Parks, or where the DeVita.
Is the before and
is
after
located.
impervious pretty similar? I looked for it before impervious, and I see an after impervious. I just didn't see a before impervious.
Yeah,
Want to make sure we're consistent with that. We've held some other applicants to that test. I just want to make sure we're fair with that.
We haven't done the exact calculation, but we're going to be very close. We've got significantly less asphalt, but I think our roof in areas will make up for that where it roughly balances. The one thing we've done here that they didn't on the previous is the bioswale.
Right.
And it's very similar to the previous site plan you approved, but it was actually on the northern island, and the site slopes to the south.
Makes sense to have it on the south side.
It missed 2/3 of the parking. So
Right.
now we're trying to catch 2/3 of the parking with our bioswale.
Where the proposed plan is at 65.4, we just need to make sure we stay under that threshold where whatever the existing is. Don't you agree, Mark? Otherwise, it's going to change some things with the stormwater. The bioswale might mitigate to a certain degree.
Yeah, I'd have to defer to Daryl, and now he had reviewed that with their project engineer, Jeff Beckett. But of course, you can go up to 80% by the zoning in the MUTC. That's one of the incentives, one of the many incentives in the MUTC. Whereas general commercial only has, is 70%. So they're well under the 80. But you make a good point as far as stormwater detention. But that was looked at and discussed with Daryl.
Okay.
I think that was part of Jeff. Jeff is the one that came to us and recommended we move that to the southern side, and I think that was part of his discussion with the town.
I worked with Jeff before. He's a very talented engineer. So some of the existing curb irons, you're going to try to reutilize those on some of the corners? Is that the plan? Okay.
Yes.
I don't happen to have the drainage plan, and so that's the reason why I'm asking a few of these questions.
What is the view of your neighbor to the south?
The view of our neighbor to the south. There is a south elevation in there. There is a landscaped area along the road that will be better than his current view across a parking lot to a building that's been vacant for a while. And then on the east side of the site, there will be a building, and there are 3 trees. We didn't want to obscure the elevations with the trees, so we haven't rendered the trees. But if you look at the second row from the bottom, where the red brick is shown, it is the right-hand elevation of those. So you can see the vertical entry on the left where it turns the corner and goes back at a 45 on the right, and then there's 2 large windows inset in the middle of that elevation, and then there are 3 trees in front of that.
Can I ask you a quick question? The bottom view, the building elevation north, I assume that's the view as you're sitting at Campbell Station or Kingston Pike. That's the view when you look to your right. That's the view you're going to have.
That is correct. That is the kitchen and service end.
Okay, are those doors, are those doors right there?
There are windows there. Okay. There are doors around, if you look at the east elevation to the left of that on the drawing. Okay. There are doors around on that side that lead out into that courtyard.
Okay, so that's a window?
Yes.
All right. And those 3 brick, that's just kind of a feature to break it up a little bit?
It is. We would love to have windows there, but because you're looking into the kitchen and the storage areas, it just...
I understand that. And that's further down. It's kind of below, so you're going to have a lot of plantings in front of that anyway.
That's correct. Matter of fact, all of that is probably below grade. I think the building at that corner is, it's what, 9 to 10 feet above the floor level.
Okay.
Where are the dumpster areas here?
The dumpster areas are where they currently are on the site. We've actually enlarged it slightly, but it is on the upper left of this drawing that you see on your screen to the northwest.
That's a hike to go take your garbage out.
It is, and the tenants understand that.
Okay. I just wouldn't want to be the guy that has to hike it out there.
That's on the post office
Well,
side, right?
there really is no other place on this site to place that dumpster unless you put it in the middle and hide it, and then you don't, your parking counts and square footages begin not to, or make your pro forma not work.
We struggle with dumpsters quite a bit, and that's as good as it's going to get on that site, tucked back off in the corner.
And it's situated so that it's easy for garbage trucks to come in and empty and everything?
That's correct.
Okay.
Any further questions?
One more question, Ed. The gray brick that you're proposing, I can kind of see somewhat of a rendering of the red brick. Do you have an idea of the gray brick?
Yes, we're looking at sort of a deep beige, light gray range, and the idea is that it looks like limestone. So if you look at the top elevation, in most downtowns, you've got a darker brick or a stone base, you've got a red face brick, and then you've got stone window surrounds, and that was the idea of that, but keep it more affordable than a stone
Okay.
would be. So we've chosen a light limestone color.
Sort of a buff color.
A buff color brick
Okay.
to make that transition with. And then the potential tenant at the corner wants a little more highlight on their building, and so they would like it to all kind of have the stone color. But all of it has the consistent darker base and then red accents woven to tie it all in together.
Have you thought about any type of coping treatment at the top of the parapet? Any kind of a detail? I know we're more schematic design
Sure.
here than CDs, but it'd be kind of nice to, we've tried to encourage a little bit of a historical touch as, you know, and trying to tie in some of the iconic features and so forth. And a lot of times it's nice to have a little bit of detail at the top of the parapet.
You're
Maybe
really
a little bit of crown, or maybe a dentil with some brick. I mean, you could do some interesting things and still try to waterproof it with some metal coping.
We're going through all of that now, and I mentioned this earlier, but it really is and the first guys, there's probably multiple that have tried this. It is a financially driven project, and you've got to keep it, but we would like to have a multi-dimensional parapet to that, whether it protrudes out or protrudes back. We're looking at all sorts of historic precedents. And
Probably the toughest thing on that site is to screen your mechanicals because of your
Absolutely.
elevations. And you're at a real disadvantage due to the fact that you're being held to a pretty high standard because of the elevations up on Kingston Pike are quite a bit higher than you. And then we're also trying to say, hey, you got to screen your mechanicals. And so I suspect that that's probably some of the process that you're working through right now of how to probably mostly on the corner coffee shop is probably where your challenges are going to be.
it is, on the other parcel, we think it's fairly straightforward. The entry elements that are pulled out to give it some dimension also stick up further and behind in those little recesses is an ideal place to
Like
hide your
your
mechanical.
RTUs and,
That's correct.
okay.
I guess we got an updated list of subject twos.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any issues with the ones that have been pointed out in?
There are a couple of them that they're meant as recommendations. We are certainly looking at those as we go through our budget. Number 2, for instance, the encouragement of a fire sprinkler system. We will do everything required by the code, and
Okay.
if we could potentially do that, then we'll look at that, even if it's not required, but it helps long-term with insurance, then we can easily begin to look at those things. The concrete instead of the plastic isn't a big deal, number 5. We'll clarify 7. We're already working on 8.
Okay.
I do
Paul,
think Noah makes a
you
good
guys see
point
anything
about
that's a problem in those?
having a cap on the, trying to incorporate some kind of cap on the buildings. I do think that's a pretty important element to try to get that in there in some fashion.
I think it would take it a little bit from institutional to more historical, and I really think that's what we're trying to go after in our architectural design standards.
Yeah.
And I think that could be left up to the staff level to be able to work through that, so you're not coming back to this body. But
that's
I
fine.
do think it needs to be reflected in the record tonight that
Yeah.
there needs to be some parapet coping treatment that occurs. And we appreciate everything you're doing. We know it is a higher standard than what other municipalities require, and we're trying to change things a little bit in the town of Farragut and hope that our architecture someday looks more timeless than it has historically.
Well, I also think the Campbell Station Inn across the street, you know, being sensitive to what that looks like and tying in, which I think this does really well. I love this. I think it's fantastic. I just had one sort of random question. The current building that's there, I do think it should come down, but I was wondering, is there anything inside that's worth saving or salvaging, maybe for habitat or Knox Heritage? Or
We wish there was, but
Nothing.
it has been stripped out for years, it appears. We've toured it several times of late. We even tried to look at it and see if we could rehab it. And
No hardwood flooring? No.
it is all
Nothing.
gone. Walls, floor, ceiling, I
Wow.
think most of the ductwork is even gone.
It's not even out of structural steel. It's out of light gauge metal studs, isn't it?
Light gauge metal
See,
studs.
there's no even value in the metal
Well,
there.
I take that back. There are bar joists and other stuff up high, but somebody did a number on it.
Okay.
Well, we're glad you're taking it down. This site
for
is,
sure.
is
It's
100 times better by taking that building down and starting from
Agreed.
scratch. And we know it costs more, but it really is going to give you a better product. And hopefully that your tenants, when you guys are pre-leasing this, will see that and appreciate it.
We do too. Thank you very much for working with us.
Okay,
Paul, would you like to?
any other comments?
Paul would, if it's all right, he would like to, he's the applicant.
Good evening. Thanks so much for looking at this tonight. I've lived in Farragut for about 19
Can you tell us your
years.
name?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Paul Schaefer. And I've lived here in Farragut for about 18 years, and twice a day since I moved here, I've come through this intersection going to my house in Brixworth. And, when we got the opportunity to get involved in this, I was very excited because, like most people, you like to do good things in your community. I think we're probably the third or fourth developer that have tried to make something go here. And it's become pretty clear that it's really just become a cost situation. We knew going in exactly what Farragut wanted here, and we totally intend to give it to them. Our issue now is, although we have no signed leases at this time, we do have some quality tenants that are interested in this project. Unfortunately, they've been interested in this project for a couple years, and they're running out of patience. And the most important one, actually, when we went to them and said, hey, we've got this development under control, they said, you know what, call us back when you own it, because they want to know it's happening. And I think Mark can vouch for the fact that since we started this the first of the year, we've bugged them a lot. And we've probably come and met with them 6 times in these, first 4 months, every step of the way. What do you think? Do you like this? Is this what the town wants? So all I ask of you is that you understand the importance of the timing here. And, I think Mark will vouch for the fact that when they tell us to jump, we say how high. And so timing is a big thing for us. We're going to Las Vegas next week. It's important for us to know if we have a project. We're not really even sure how much this costs at this point. We're hoping, approval tonight and hopefully next week with the visual that we'll know that we've got our, foundation to build on. But we're very excited about it and very positive on it, and look forward to putting something really nice at this important corner. Thank you.
I've got one person that signed up to speak on this.
Okay.
If you want to go ahead.
Who is it?
It's Robin Hill. If you want to give her the mic. Go to the mic. Give it the mic.
I don't see him.
Robin's over here.
I got here late and I didn't see the traffic plan. This is at the corner of Kingston Pike and Camel Station Road, is it not?
It is.
And what's the traffic engineer's take on how hard it's going to be to get in and out of this site, particularly if you want to get out of the site and go west?
I'm not sure that the traffic engineer's here tonight. Bob, we've dealt with this site for a lot of years. My instinct is that if traffic gets backed up on South Campbell Station, just go around the bank and come out at the municipal center and go to the light. And that way you're going to have that light to be able to give you some gaps and some signalization to get out. We know that it's less than perfect, but we also know that having access directly on South Campbell Station Road, or heaven forbid, we're dealing with the grade on Kingston Pike, would be a disaster. So it is, there's definitely potential for backup at that stoplight there where somebody's going to trying to make a left turn on Campbell Station and those left turn lanes are backed up. However, being that you do have access to that light, I think that's a pretty good mitigation for dealing with the traffic that's there.
I think you ought to look at that pretty carefully. I believe that the site is virtually unworkable traffic-wise at 8 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You can go over there and look at what you've got, and it's a mess now without that. So I would urge you all to give that due consideration and be sure it works, because that's a busy intersection, and it definitely has got to work, and you definitely will not be able to get out of that site and go west without going through the White Store Shopping Center or down to Jamestown.
You don't think going around to Municipal Center and catching the light is a
Well,
good alternative?
I don't know whether it'd work or not.
That's how I would do it.
That's how I would do it. Now, granted, somebody that's not familiar with the town and not realize that there's a light over there, they may get stuck trying to turn left for quite a ways. There's no doubt that traffic backs up there.
If you get stuck trying to turn left, eventually people take chances, and when you take a chance, you have a wreck.
It may be a thing where we have
That's
some
all I have to say
signage.
about that, but I think that's a problem from a traffic standpoint.
It may be a point where we have signage in the development proper. If you're going to Kingston Pike, go this way.
Louise hits the nail on the head. We actually have some signage like that now that's over there next to the Wald Wing Cafe. There's some things that if you want to go westbound on Kingston Pike and the arrow sends you this way, not necessarily at Wald Wing, but that might be appropriate here, that westbound. The big issue that I would think is, well, really kind of eastbound or westbound Kingston Pike could be a challenge, because either which way, an individual's trying to turn left onto Campbell Station. And I would not promote another signalized intersection there by any means. I think we already have two that are really close, and I think this one has access to this, but I think some signage could go a long way in directing some traffic that maybe is not familiar with Farragut around the bank or the credit union, and come in over off the Municipal Center.
Have signage up by the...
Well, actually have signage on this site, really, that, Kingston Pike traffic, and maybe with an arrow, and it might be a little roundabout way, but there's no doubt they're going to figure it out really quickly. Hey, this is the way to get out.
Easily.
We know that it's less than perfect. We also really would like to see this site redeveloped, and anybody that's going to redevelop the site is going to generate traffic. It doesn't matter if it's a doctor's office or it's retail, it's going to generate traffic, so their traffic's going to have to get out on Kingston Pike, and I don't think it would be appropriate to say, hey, you can't develop your site because we're worried about what your future customers are going to do. But I do like Mr. Hill's thought that we need to think about it and digest it, and I do think some signage would be a good way to address it.
There are easily accessed signal highways. So
Well, you're having to go west to go east, which is a little counterintuitive, but nevertheless, once you realize, hey, that's how you need to get to the light during heavy peak traffic
And
periods.
that's the fastest way to do it.
Oh, absolutely, it's the fastest way to do it.
I'm from Jersey, and that's the way I would handle it.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
So the motion is to approve it subject to the 8 conditions, plus incorporating a cap to the buildings to be reviewed by the staff, so it doesn't have to come back before you. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. It would be a great pleasure to see that area developed again. I'm getting tired of people telling me, when are you going to do something about it?
Now we can say, when are you going to do something about it?
Well, we'll talk after Tuesday's meeting.
There you go.
Good luck, and thank you.
I guess hopefully ICSC will bear some fruit for you.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item is discussion and public hearing on a request to rezone parcel 59.07, tax map 152, located at 11739 Turkey Creek Road, approximately 16.38 acres from R1 to R3. Site incorporated as applicant. You got any summary, Mark?
Just real quickly, you discussed this last month as a workshop item. This is right across from Anchor Park, which is that OSP property there on the screen. It has an existing house, kind of a long gravel driveway that serves the house and one other house to the west. That basically those will be incorporated into the development. The applicant is requesting R3, which is small lot, single family. It's very similar in form and lot size to what you have on the adjacent property at Briarstone. You wouldn't really notice the difference visually. The property on the future land use map is actually specified as medium density residential, which is actually much higher density than what they're requesting. Again, this was discussed last month, and I do have one person that signed up to speak on this, but the staff does recommend approval of Resolution PC-16-07. We will need a modified survey that the property owner is selling off the very north part of this tract to the lady that lives and on this property here. I'll show you. Basically, this part is being combined, so that's not going to be part of the rezoning. So they'll need to amend that exhibit before this is taken to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. But with that condition, the staff would recommend approval of this rezoning. And like I say, I do have somebody that has signed up to speak on this.
You're from the developer first?
Have any
The applicant?
questions? Yeah.
David Robinette, Site Incorporated, 228 Warren Road, Farragut. We discussed this pretty extensively at the workshop, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
So, Mr. Robinette, you said that you guys are planning on 36 lots, is that?
Actually, it's 34 buildable lots. There's going to be some lots that are created underneath that 100-foot power line that are going to be open space top lots.
Okay.
I believe it will subdivide into 36 lots, but for 34 buildable.
Okay. And you realize that you have a buffer strip that's running along the residential next to Sailview and along the other side next
Yes,
to
ma'am.
Firestone? Okay.
And that's been taken into the plan.
Okay. And I remember you saying the last time that your lot sizes were about 75 by 125. Is that about that?
Roughly, yes.
Okay.
Do we have a
Yeah,
speaker?
I do. I have Mike Mitchell signed up to speak.
Mitchell.
I'm Mike Mitchell. I live in Brixworth on Brixworth Boulevard. I know the folks at site, they do a great job. The gentleman from Sailview was here during the workshop. I couldn't attend, but I did watch it on television. And I agree with him. He made the comment that it doesn't scale to Sailview. In the interest of fairness, I was wondering if someone on MPC, I know that one of you in the workshop mentioned that it should be an R2. And I think that that's very reasonable, and I appreciate you doing that. What's the square footage of the lots?
Well, the minimum required in R3 and what they're proposing is 8,500 square feet. You'd have to have at least 8,500 square feet.
Got to look a lot like Briarstone.
Yes, it would be.
You know, you kind of have a dilemma here. The people in Sailview have been there for a long time. And when they built their homes, they expected to be protected by the zoning. I think site does a great job. I'm not against the development, but I would hope that someone would offer some type of a compromise in the 10 or 11,000 square foot range as a matter of fairness to the people of Sailview and to keep it to scale to Sailview. You know, the Briarstone thing is a little bit of a sore point. I actually know Victor Jernigan very well, and I remember being here in 2004 where the residents in the town and the developer made a deal. And Briarstone, and by the way, Bob Money at Saddlebrook, it's top flight. I think they do a wonderful job, and I think it's a good-looking development. But that wasn't what was agreed on. It was supposed to be a road which went up behind the white house on the hill, and the condos were out of sight. Well, you know, through being turned over a few times, things change. But an issue of fairness for the people in Sailview, I think, would be to reach a reasonable compromise to let the project go forward and be fair to those folks. I would think something in the 10 to 11,000 square foot range would be a good compromise. I know a little bit about compromises. I was one of the architects of the Sheffield Compromise. We have record housing starts in this town. One of the reasons is Sheffield. The residents, the MPC, and the BOMA came together, and we found a way to find something that was fair for everybody. So I would simply urge the commission to see if there's something you could do for the folks in Sailview. Thank you.
I've done a lot of work on this. Usually when I see property like that, the first thing I do is calculate R1 OSR to see what the how many lots you would get from that. And so when I calculate it based on the 16.38, you end up with 35.68 lots. So I look at this and I think I would be hard pressed to say that you can't rezone this R1 OSR, since considering that it's lower than R2. So 34 lots to me is what they're saying seems reasonable. And then I went through and I met with the gentleman that showed up. We sat down with Ashley because I wanted their input, because there's R1 OSR and then there's R3. When you take in R3, you have a minimum lot size of 8,500. That does not include the buffer to the rear. So if you're doing a 75 by 125, that comes out to 9,375 square feet. If you add in the buffer of 25 by 75, which is another additional 1,875 square feet, you end up with a lot size, an effective lot size of about 11,250 square feet. Now, if he goes down to the minimum lot size of 8,500 square feet, and you still have a 75-foot wide lot, plus that 25 buffer on the back, you end up with an effective lot size of 10,375 square feet. So to me, with them doing R3, they have this built-in protection of that buffer zone that has to be planted. The one difference is in R1 OSR, the setback is 50 feet from that rear property line. The setback for R3 is 20 foot from the property line, but then you have the additional 25-foot buffer, so you have effectively a 45-foot setback. So in my mind, you might have 5 feet, the buildings are a little bit 5 feet closer to your yard, but you also have this required buffer that has to be planted. So thinking about the same density, it's R1 OSR, R3, they're probably going to have about the same density lot size. You have this extra added buffer protection, and you have an effective lot size of between 10,000 and 11,000 square feet. I did not do it with R2. R2 is a little bit, R1 OSR to me is an easy calculation because that's just multiplying the acreage by 2.178, which is 43,560 over 20,000.
Right.
So that gave me my baseline, and then I worked from there, but I did not do R2. I know the minimum lot size for them is 15,000 square feet. And of course, I don't know that there would be a buffer, and I don't have their setbacks on there, but
Well, R2 next to R2 or R1 OSR next to R2, neither one of those would require a buffer. And so what that would do is that would make a future homeowner eligible to clear all the way to the property line with no consequence. Versus an R3, you have a 25-foot required buffer that's going to be owned by the HOA, and that homeowner who lives on the other side of the buffer, the new homeowner, does not have the right to get into that buffer and clear it. Now, sometimes they might get in there with a weed eater, but they are not supposed to get into that buffer. And so for me, if I was R1 or R2, and if I could have my choice, I like having an R3 next to me due to the fact that I know I have a required buffer. And it is not just a buffer visually of 25 feet. It is a buffer where the developer has to go in and landscape that buffer. We have some pretty strict requirements about understory trees and shrubs and canopy trees that have to go into that buffer. And I've done some of the same math that Louise has done, and quite frankly, we are yielding one less lot under the R3. The R1, where it's a really good candidate, is when you're dealing with a piece of property that has some undevelopable property, whether it's sinkholes or steep grades or floodplain. And then the OSR, with the nice thing about the OSR is it has that 35% requirement, which you've been a part of, you've known obviously.
We did that on Sheffield.
And it
we were
it worked great on
one
Sheffield.
of the architects of, yes.
Well, you remember the sinkholes in Sheffield.
That's why we did it.
And so it was a great candidate for that. However, this site, with the exception of the TVA transmission easement, there's an old pond there, but it's not a sinkhole, so they get to actually take the old cattle pond out. It really is not a good candidate when you look at the description of the idea behind the OSR for the R1 OSR. Again, we're actually yielding. As a matter of fact, tonight, part of our motion and action could be R3 up to 34 lots on this side, on this particular site. So that could be part of the action tonight if this body so feels desired and the applicant understands the ramifications with it. But, and I'm talking about 34 buildable lots, because they're going to have open space lots scattered in different areas.
And do we have anything that visualizes that?
I'm sure the applicant probably has done some conceptual design, but tonight we're not approving a concept plan or a preliminary plat. We're purely focused on the zoning.
Where are the buffers on the map?
Mark can draw those
like
buffers
that.
in.
Yeah. They would be required to plant along the periphery of the R3. So the side and the rear property lines, not across the front, but the side and the rear, just where I'd highlighted. So that would abut the Sellview subdivision and actually the Briarstone.
Well, and doesn't the front have an easement, remind me?
TVA transmission easement?
That's the thing
It
down
kind of
there.
crosses
Yeah.
closer to Turkey Creek Road.
Okay.
You have to be careful what we plant down there because of the overhead.
Right.
Is the resident going to stay there?
My understanding is that he is.
Talking about the White House?
No, this is not the White House. That was the one with Briarstone. This is the
I think
house.
the White House is on this one, isn't it?
Yeah,
The
it's
White
the
House-
old. It's the old farmhouse at the top of the hill.
Okay, I'm talking about the nicer White House. But
Well,
Both Mr. Smith and Mr. Scarborough are going to stay, and we'll
Okay.
access off of our termination of the road back there.
Matter of fact, their driveway will actually go away.
That's correct.
And then they'll have road access on the new cul-de-sac.
right, they drive through the subdivision. What did the gentleman from Saleview say when you spoke with him?
They didn't give me a final, their concern was more, after I explained to them what my struggle was with, because I would, like I said to them, I would be hard-pressed if they came back and said, well, we want to rezone it R1 OSR. I don't know that I could say no to that, because but I don't think it's appropriate. I think they have better protections in R3.
Will the buffers provide for, there were several complaints of water?
And that was their biggest issue, was drainage. And Ashley and I both encouraged them to be part of the process, making sure, because I know Darrell will stay on top of it, but it comes better from residents when they're involved in the process. So when the developer staff meetings happen, we've encouraged them to be involved with that, because it is an issue. My understanding is with drainage, the new development can't make it worse. They're not allowed to put more drainage, but they don't necessarily have to improve what's going on their property. We're hoping that with drainage, because they're going to have to put in drainage, that it does improve what's going on.
I don't have a problem with 34. Is there a way to get that into the zoning tonight? I mean, it's just that the Briarstone evolved from so much differently than what we agreed on as a community. I'd kind of like to see this one, and I mean, site's wonderful, but I don't know who the developer is.
I can assure you, any of the revisions that Briarstone went through had to come back through this body.
I know
now, it may have not required a sign on the road, but those revisions still came back through this body.
We were asleep at the switch on that, okay? And that is that's the burden of the residents. And that's why I spoke so strongly about the issue in public forum. Mm-hmm. When we think we have a deal, maybe we should just be a little more vigilant. And that's on us. But, if this could be locked down to 34, and the folks in Sailview, they seem to be okay, then I think that'd be okay.
To answer your question, you actually had two questions that are still unanswered. First, the zoning really doesn't affect stormwater at all, whether irrespective of what zoning. Typically, we do see when a project is developed, we do see some mitigation or improvement in existing stormwater, the before and the after. And due to the fact is that they have to meet our new requirements. The stormwater detention ponds ended up typically at the bottom of the site. You end up water being directed into a detention facility that wasn't directed into a detention facility before. So, but to answer your question, we deal with all that on the preliminary plat. We get right into the details of all the grading, and that would be a great time for any of the homeowners who have existing stormwater issues to say, hey, I've got a lot of water that runs into my yard. Let's see, maybe there's an easy way with a berm to be able to direct some of this water, maybe through that open space that we're talking about before they go through and vegetate it, to be able to direct some of that water into the detention. And then your final question is, yes, we could, if the developer, David's here representing the developer, if they understand the ramifications of it, we could definitely say 34 lots is what we're comfortable with. This is R3, and that way it doesn't creep
I think
on
that's
us above and beyond. David, do you feel comfortable addressing that tonight?
Can you give me 35 just for a little bit of error there?
I don't know if that's unreasonable.
I think 35 matches the R1 OSR.
I think that's a positive step. We just, you know, look, don't get me wrong, Briarstone is beautiful, but we ended up with a lot more density on Turkey Creek than we ever imagined, and we have a burden that a lot of people don't have, and that's the bicycle riders. And, you know, they're supposed to ride two abreast. They don't. And, you know, we're putting this right across from our premier park, or one of our premier parks, but it's the premier bicycle park. And, you know, when you're on the S-turns, that's really something to be following 30 people. You're a bicyclist, Ed.
Yeah, and no, there's seldom anybody dares ride two abreast on that road. You're lucky to dare to ride on it anymore.
I'm clear, I'm not a bicycle rider, obviously. So two abreast, is that like this, or is that like this?
Side by side. That's the state law. But when you're riding in a pack of 30 people, you're riding 3 and 4 across, and they do that for safety. But, you know, it is an imposition if you live on that road, and you just, and that doesn't concern me so much as when we have an inexperienced bicycle rider in the S-turns waving you on through a blind turn into a car. I just simply stay behind them. I'm patient. You know, they chose to ride that day. I'll just take my time. But, you know, there's a big difference between the inexperienced rider and the experienced rider. But we have a lot of bicycle riders, and, you know, we really ended up with a lot more density than we ever dreamed of.
Well, we're actually hoping with this site and some connectivity that we are now requiring that we've not required in the past, that this site, some of those homeowners will actually have an option instead of going out Turkey Creek. There's a back way out that they're going to be able to meander through, and that's also going to allow some homeowners that live back to the north side of this access to Anchor Park. And so we're really excited about having some of that connectivity that we really haven't done in the past. Really, historically, the town has been a community full of cul-de-sacs, and we're trying to encourage a little bit more connectivity and maybe not quite as many cul-de-sacs as we have historically. And that might help some of those things. Maybe might help some of the circuits with the bicycle riders and help some folks instead of going all the way the long way around to be able to. We've
inherited that, and we'll live with it. Most of those folks bring their cars to Anchor Park. I'm not even sure they're Farragut residents, but that's fine. I have a lot of friends that ride bikes. But, you know, I'm just saying that we ended up with a whole lot more density than we ever dreamed of. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mike.
I have one more question for Mr. Robinette. This, the picture here of the subject property, are the two landowners that are still there, are you buying their property as well, or are you excluding their property from this subject property?
The house that is on this particular property, where it kind of makes the narrowed down piece on this this drawing here,
yes,
there will be a line. I mean, we're basically, if you extend that shortest line straight across, that will be the portion that will be subdivided into the 35 lots in this development. Those houses, you see the driveway going to Mr. Scarborough's, Mr. Smith, they will have a temporary drive across Miss Lauren's that we were talking about earlier, that she's buying basically the connection over to the Briarstone Drive, or that little flag lot out through there. She's buying a portion back in there to make her lot a little bit bigger.
Mark, can you put that slide up, this one, and draw on there what he's talking about?
I think what he's talking about, and this is what I mentioned about the rezoning exhibit, is that the R3 would be basically below that line. That'd be above the strip. This would all remain as R1, and then basically this lady here is getting some of this property here.
Okay.
We had originally thought about that as being a connection to Briarstone, but really topographically and with this existing house here, of course that could change, but it just didn't make a lot of sense. And what we were looking at doing for future connectivity is upon further development of Mr. Scarborough's property here, when they develop this property, you know, they'll be required to stub a right-of-way out to Mr. Scarborough's property. And upon further subdivision of his property, that right-of-way will extend to where a road has been stubbed out in Briarstone, so that, as Noah's talks about, there'll be the ability to get to Briarstone and then over to Dunlin. Right now, Briarstone is working in phase 3, and as you remember, that phase is the phase that connects Briarstone into Audubon Hills. So Briarstone will be, you know, extending their road system, and they've got one coming in here and going up to Audubon Hills.
Okay.
This development would be required to tie into that, as it's dependent on this middle track being further developed.
Well, that clarifies it a lot. So this entire drawing here that says subject property is not
That's not
accurate.
accurate. Yeah, it needs.
Okay, that's what I was concerned about.
That's what I was
Thank you.
talking about with the exhibit needing to be amended to reflect
Thank you.
accurately what they're wanting to rezone.
You're talking about, that's the meets
Thank
and
you very
bounds
much.
survey that you needed? Okay.
Yeah, and that needs to be provided before this goes to the Board of Mayor.
And that's
Alderman.
being
Is
prepared.
that on the subject to list here?
Yeah, that was mentioned as, prior to the review from the Board of Mayor and
Okay.
Alderman, established a meets and bounds description of the area to be rezoned.
I see it. Thank you.
Further comments? Okay, do we have a motion?
And is this also subject to the 35 lot? Is that what y'all are talking about?
That's what we've agreed
Subject
to.
35. That's, he's already agreed to it.
I don't really like doing those kinds of things, but I guess you can do it.
Probably not.
It's,
Well, that would give him the existing house plus 34. Is that your understanding, David?
Sure.
So that'd give you a total 35. You're comfortable with that? And I think that's real consistent with the R1 and maybe what some of the other neighbors have had concern and what Mr. Mitchell was talking about.
yeah, you can do it, yeah.
Make a motion to approve R1 to R3, subject to a meets and bounds description and a maximum of 35 buildable lots.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. Next item on the agenda is discussion on a request to rezone a portion of parcel 9, tax map 142 north of the Farragut Church of Christ, 22.13 acres, from R2 to S1, Good Works Limited LLC applicant.
This,
Got a summary?
this request has got kind of some different facets to it. The request that's been submitted, and this is all just workshop discussion, so these things are all subject to change, but this is the existing zoning out there, and the applicant is requested to rezone about a little over 22 acres of they're requesting to rezone basically this area here to the new or the modified community service zoning district. As you know, we we basically replaced our old community service zone to provide it with a little more functionality. It was hardly ever used, and what we tried to do was build in that zoning district some maybe transitional uses that were low traffic impact type uses, and we came up with allowing for, you know, elderly care type facilities because it is kind of a civic institutional zoning district. It's the closest zoning district we have to civic institutional. So what the applicants wanted to do with that 22-acre area is to develop a senior living community. We also created provisions for the senior living community in our zoning ordinances, part of that effort to update the S1. When we met with the applicant about their specific request, we were also kind of looking at this more comprehensively, because the thing is, you're going to have Peterson Road is going to extend up into this property. That's going to be one of the accesses into this property. And what we were thinking about is how is that going to impact the existing lots along Peterson Road extension, and what kind of zoning districts make sense and make the property, you know, developable, realistically developable. As you can see, the property on the south end where the Farragut Press building is currently zoned office. And then you have a strip of commercial, ironically, to the north of that. And then you have about a 100-foot wide buffer zoning district. It doesn't have any trees in it, but that we were kind of looking at that and seeing what logically would make sense, maybe as part of their request, to kind of clean up some of the zoning in the general area to give it more, you know, logic, I guess, for lack of a better word. Let me pull up their site plan. Well, this is the rezoning exhibit, and what they're requesting to do is that office area, they're requesting for that to be commercial, and that's basically this lower part here along Kingston Pike, the southernmost portion. And then the part that's currently zoned commercial and buffer, they're looking at changing that to office. So you got kind of a traditional transition from a major arterial road back to a residential or senior living community type setting to the north. Now they've also got this little tract up here that probably needs to be addressed. That's, as presented, that would be kind of an island of R2. It probably either needs to be incorporated into the S1 or incorporated into the R1 so that it, again, makes some sense. So there's a lot of things that we were trying to accomplish and think about with this, because when you put the road through here, and I might just go to their concept plan just to show you what we're talking about here. This is actually the next item, but they're interrelated. The staff recommended that they added some curvature to this road, this Peterson Road extension, and that helps slow traffic. You never want to have a road that's straight. That's just bad design. so you don't want to do that. So you build in some curvature to that road, and that also allows these properties here that are going to be bisected by that public right-of-way to be more developable. It gives them more space. And again, we didn't really see the purpose of the buffer zoning district in that context. We can certainly understand it to the east where it was behind the Ingalls over here. But we didn't really see what, given what their request is to the north, what would be the purpose of that. So that's kind of a summary of a lot of the issues that we're talking about. And just for clarification purposes, I may just go back to to their base request, and we'll just talk about that first.
Can I make a suggestion that we kind of divide this conversation out into two separate?
Yeah, that's what I was going to do.
Let's talk about the S1 and then talk about the other zoning so
Yeah.
that we're not swapping back and forth.
That's exactly what I was getting ready to do.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to talk about the S1, which what they're talking about is, oops, a minute here. This area here. This is Smith Road, and down here's Kingston Pike. So it's a little over 22 acres. That's all currently zoned R2. They're wanting to rezone that to S1. The future land use map on that property actually specifies it as medium-density residential. It's basically the same area where the apartment complex had been proposed a few months ago. The S1 zoning district is basically it's a civic institutional zoning district, similar to what I guess you would say as far as the built environment. The Farragut Church of Christ would be considered a civic institutional land use, schools, senior living communities, parks, community facilities, those type things are what's permitted in the S1. So what we were trying to do with the S1 with elderly care facilities is just to include those because they're kind of quasi-institutional, and they're also generally low impact as far as traffic in the S1 zoning district to give it a little more functionality and flexibility. So that's what their request is, and we can certainly talk about that. There is a question about whether we should amend the future land use map for the property. I think if you're basing it on what the applicant's wanting to do, then I think, in the way that their build-out would be, in my opinion, it would be similar to a medium-density residential. I mean, you've got a facility, then you're going to have detached and attached, independent living units around the periphery. So in whole, it would be similar to a very low-density, medium-density residential. But if you look at all the uses permitted in the S1 zoning district, it would make more sense to actually change that future land use map to civic institutional. That's something to think about and talk about, I suppose. But in and of itself, the staff does support the request to rezone this property to S1. We do feel that with the new provisions in the S1, it is a good transitional land use between, more commercial and office to the south and the lower density residential to the north.
Mark, would the advantage to changing the future land use map be just in the event that this developer didn't carry through with what?
Yeah, that's one of the advantages, yeah. Like I say, if you're looking at it just from the majority of the uses allowed in S1, probably the future land use map should be changed to civic institutional for that portion of the property, yeah.
Mark, I keep hearing that 12 units per acre is medium density. I think we need to address it comprehensive land use map and the densities that they put forth versus what we have in our ordinances in future. But I think we do need to change the land use map for S1 rather than leave it as it is.
You mean to make it civic institutional in that area in our future land use plan?
S1.
Make the S1 civic institutional instead of medium-density residential. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. Particularly when you look at the comprehensive land use map, which says 12 units is medium density, and I don't agree with that at all.
Anybody else on that question? Trying to keep this organized. Is the future land use map, is everybody in agreement that needs to be civic institutional for that area?
Well, I don't know whether that makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, what you're turning around and doing is making the future land use plan into a zoning ordinance, basically.
Well, we're just trying to make the two
I mean,
consistent. is all we're trying
at least
to do.
my interpretation on the land use plan is those are kind of generalized
No,
statements.
they are,
as to
but
what
if you
is-
look at the majority of the uses in S1, it would be most closely similar to a civic institutional land use. You know, if you're just basing it solely on a senior living community, I think you could argue that could be considered medium-density residential. But as a whole, it probably would be more consistent to be civic institutional. In the event that, like Roseanne says, that the developer doesn't develop the property as a senior living community.
At the same time, we're talking about that S1 in that particular chunk of property, and you got a whole bunch of property in that segment that probably needs to be zoned pretty much the same. No, it's not.
But it
not
all
every, not every
would be zoned
acre is a
S1.
different zoning. That doesn't make any sense.
I mean, all that acreage is proposed to be rezoned to S1.
Yeah.
And really, the church to the south of that property, in function and form, is S1. I mean, it's not zoned that, but that's really what it would be most similar to as far as a land use.
How is it shown on our land use plan? The church, is that shown civic institution?
I think it might be, actually, yeah.
Yes, it is. It's shown civic institutional.
But what's the actual zoning of it?
R2.
R2, yeah.
Mark, did you say that the 22 acres would be both attached and detached homes? Is that the,
But yeah, that's what they're proposing.
and how many would there be in there?
Well, I think it's early in the process. Their concept plan we'll look at here. I can pull that up on the screen. The,
Elderly residential housing units and 95 assisted living memory care units. This document.
yeah. You want me to pull up the concept plan for that? Would that help?
Kind of useful if it was superimposed over this one, but that's.
Yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, that's a concept plan for the, and down here for, just for orientation, this is Kingston Pike. This will be Peterson Road Extension. And obviously the development is basically that. This is the licensed facility. It's in the center of the property. Then you got these detached units along the periphery. which we talked about in depth when the apartment project was being discussed, is that if you look at the way that transitions are described in our land use plan, one could interpret that as encouraging a form-based transition, and that's what this project would do. You would have, on the periphery, you would have residential detached units that would be similar in form, probably more like Baldwin Park to the northeast, which is over here, because you do have attached single-family in Waverly Court to the northwest. And then interior to the development, all these on the exterior are detached. You do have some duplexes in the interior, some villas, and so as you get internal to the development, the residential units become attached. So it's kind of a mixture, just like we talked about with when we were amending the S1 and creating the senior living community provisions. This is exactly what that would provide for, a mixture of different housing types that are an attempt to transition in form to what the surrounding context is.
Mark, there's one thing about this plan that we discussed before, and that there was no access to Smith Road except for an emergency access, and this looks like a regular access.
Yeah, we would definitely want an access to Smith Road. It would, it would only be used. They've made it so circuitous that the only people that would use it are people that are going to go to Smith Road anyway. They're going to be inside the development. There's no reason why anybody. The advantage to that actually is that you will relieve stress at the intersection of Smith and Kingston Pike. So that's actually a good thing for traffic flow in the area. It's one of those things that you're not going to have cut through traffic with something like that. But we would definitely, consistent with our land use plan and design standards, we would definitely want to have the connection there. They're also showing connections to, abutting properties. These would, of course, occur, upon further development. But all that is highly encouraging good planning. It's part of the reason why some of our roads are bogged down, because you don't have any other options to go from A to B. You're forced to go down to a collector street, and that's the only option you have. That's the problem with Grigsby Chapel Road. You've got all these subdivisions that have a single entrance, so they're all forced to go to Grigsby Chapel Road. If there had been good lateral connectivity in the past, they would, like you have in Village Green and Fox Den, that's a great example where they connect. You can get through those developments without having to go down to Grigsby Chapel Road. And that's what we're trying to encourage here.
It looks like that at least the conjunction there with Smith Road at Olympic would be better than down in that hole.
Yeah, you want to try to line up
yeah,
that. Yeah, we would want to try to line up accesses. That's usually a safer condition unless you have some sight distance problem. Again, I don't foresee that access point being, and of course it does provide a secondary means of getting into the property, and you probably will need that with this kind of development. If something happened, heaven forbid, and this area down here was blocked for some reason, and somebody was having a heart attack over here, it'd be a great thing to be able to get to them in a secondary access point. So there's a lot of advantages to trying to do that. They intentionally did design it very circuitous, though, so that it would discourage anybody wanting to try to use that as a shortcut. And I think they've done a good job with that.
Maybe we're getting a little bit ahead looking at the site plan.
Yeah, well,
like
they're interrelated in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of got to think about
I'd
it.
like to go back to the zoning issue, that portion there to the east, little segment there that's zoned
Little
R2
section,
also?
that one?
Yes, that
Yeah.
one. Is that included tonight in what we're talking about?
It's not in their requested S1. I think it either needs to be or it logically needs to be combined with the R1 to the east, so that you don't have that kind of orphan tract of R2 there. And then whatever the property owner does on the property to the east, they'll probably, you know, if they need to rezone it, they'll do it. But in the interim, that would make more sense to combine it with one or the other.
Can I ask a question about that from a purely legal standpoint of rezoning and then rezoning again? Because more than likely, I don't know if it'll be rezoned or one, has Mr. Horn indicated what he would like to do with that property?
No. We met with their representative, and he's here if you have any questions of him, but we were trying just to look at this a little more comprehensively. Initially, they just submitted a request for the 22 acres, and that's fine. But if you're putting this road in there, we were looking at it and saying, you know, this is going to create some issues with the adjoining properties, and how can we try to address that in a logical manner so that they're developable and the zoning makes sense in the context.
I guess what I'm asking, is this a housekeeping issue, or is there some?
No, they'll have to apply formally for that. Yeah.
Okay.
But this is all workshop discussion. We didn't
Okay.
want them to do that
Would they be able
prematurely
just to
without.
amend the application then, if they can work that out with Mr. Horn, or what?
Yeah, I guess you could consider it all part of the same application if you're, yeah, because it's all interrelated to the road that's coming in off of Kingston Pike, that's being triggered by this development and the rezoning request for this development.
There's a big clump of trees there,
Yeah.
as I recall.
Yeah, that's over here, and they're showing, on this plan, they're showing to save this area here and create kind of a little pocket park area to incorporate that into the development, and we certainly applaud the developer for doing that. I think that provides some value to their project and also the larger community.
Getting back to the land use plan, I running the numbers, it seems like what was the number I came up with? 159 total units over the 22 some odd acres comes out to 7.18 units per acre, which certainly fits within the medium density residential as we currently define it. And it makes sense to me that it's civic institutional as well. So I don't know that I have an opinion on whether we need to alter the land use plan or not.
Okay.
On that one.
Well, that's
I
one
think
of the
for
discussions.
consistency, for one thing, Louise, and then the other is, as I mentioned before, some assurance that in the event that this project fell through, that we'd have a little bit of protection, that it would stay in the S1
Well, civic
area.
institutional.
Yeah, civic institutional area.
Well, the zoning itself would require them to come back before this body, go through the public notification process, and be rezoned. But there's no doubt if we wanted to address that, I don't see why it couldn't be addressed concurrently.
Yeah.
Personally, I think the S1 epitomizes transitional zoning. I mean, I think it's exactly what we've been looking for years as a way to feather the density. And I think they've done a really good job, even though we're not necessarily talking about the site plan, but, you know, it's a conceptual plan right now. And using some of the adjacent form-based design and incorporating it and feathering the density to the middle is exactly what we've looked for in the land use plan.
That's what wasn't present in the apartment proposal.
That's true. That's true.
So on the question of the community service zone, I guess, and just, we got Noah's feedback, I think, on that. How do the rest of you feel about that?
I think it's if it were voted on today, I'd approve a rezoning to S1. It makes sense. The project makes sense, and the form of it makes sense.
I think Mr. Horn's representative, Mr. Baker's here. If he wanted to address, are you comfortable with a designation change in the land use plan that we run concurrently? It won't delay you guys one way or the other, but it is something that does affect the property. Yes, sir.
I do have a couple of people that want to speak on this before we.
I'm John Baker with Horn Properties. In regards to the future land use plan, I'll need to convey that with Mr. Horn on the designated use for making that permanent, at least until we know we're at a position for close to a final vote on rezoning for S1. And in regards to the R2, that's new, Mark, but I see your point, why to leave a little portion of that hanging out there. It only makes sense to make it an R1 designation completely all the way over to Boring Road. But I don't quite understand the reasoning for changing the future land use plan, since like Mark said, it is a medium density type use.
I think it would give some of your neighbors some comfort, and that's really what it boils down to, and making it a little more consistent with the S1. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that it's inconsistent today as being medium density residential. It's just that the interpretation of medium density residential to some mean apartments and to others may mean senior living, and there's definitely a rub with one and not the other.
I understand.
And so personally, I'd be comfortable moving forward with it without changing the land use plan, but again, I speak for one, not all of us.
Well, my only reservation for that would be, does this go concurrently with the approval for the zoning, or is that something that has to further out?
It could go concurrently. What you need to keep in mind is a land use plan designation does not, it ends at this body. It does not go to the Board of Mayor and Alderman.
Okay.
And so, of course, your zoning goes on to the Board of Mayor and Alderman with 2 readings.
Okay. Well, I guess for Mr. Horn, I'll speak with him on that, and I guess for our next agenda item, I can let, sometime next week, Mark know, or is that sufficient?
You're on the agenda for next month
yes.
As an action item, and so you do have some time to kind of digest this. I don't see why we would have to workshop a land use plan change again.
That's kind of what we're doing
since
tonight.
They're all
actually.
kind of intertwined together, and. But anyway, they're definitely something to digest, because if you went back to something other than S1, it could cause some friction for you. So you just need to be aware.
That's correct. That's my only reservation
Right.
to it. But we have every confidence that Good Works is going to produce the plan, and then that's our initiative here.
Right.
For Good Works to move forward.
I'm certainly, personally, I still don't see any particular need to get wrapped around the axle and changing the land use plan, because I think it adequately covers this, and I think this thing ought to get on.
I agree with Ed. I'm comfortable with it too, but again, I don't speak for anybody but myself.
Okay.
Well, I'll put that on the agenda next time for the future land use map, just for a voting item, just in case.
John, I'm going to have questions for you on the other part where the rezoning of that front portion.
Okay,
So,
no problem.
But I think you said we had people that were
Like to speak on
wanted
this
to
item?
speak to this item.
That are here to speak. I don't know if, and I suppose they're talking about the main rezoning request. So first one is Michael Wilson.
Good evening, Michael Wilson, 333 Bernie Circle, Farragut, Tennessee, and will be a neighbor of Good Works, I believe, here in the near future. I want to start by saying that as a neighbor of this property, I support the vision that's laid out by Good Works, and as you've seen in their site plan, As Mark has identified, I believe this development is consistent with the comprehensive land use plan. In particular, I like the use of the gridded street system that goes through the plan that's consistent with the land use plan, as well as the connection of the trails through that plan to Smith Road, Kingston Pike area, and up through the existing trails. I think that is very consistent with the plan. You've been discussing my one minor concern with respect to ensuring that the land use and the zoning district are consistent with each other. And I want to just bring up a couple of items. First, you recently passed Ordinance 16-05, and that was again passed by the BOMA and put into ordinance, which basically redefined this S1 community service district. And I just want to point out that in Section 1, Paragraph A, the general description paragraph, the first sentence says, consistent with adopted plans and policies of the town, this district is intended primarily to provide for the development and community and public type uses. So that ordinance calls for consistency with adopted plans. And I want to remind the FMPC that you did adopt the comprehensive land use plan and the future land use map back in 2012. And on page 35, it says, Table 3-1 correlates future land use designations with the closest current town zoning categories. It is best to have consistency between land use and zoning. And so I think with the ordinance, with the reading in the ordinance and the reading in the land use plan, that it really does make sense that those are consistent. There's nothing to say you can't come back and just like you can request a change to zoning, you can request a change to the land use plan down the road. And I believe that someone on the panel, I think it was Noah up here on the commission, hit the reason on the nail on the head here. This gives us some comfort, those that surround this property, that this is what we're doing with the piece of property. Good Works and good faith is coming in good faith to build a development that we all agree with. I will say both Baldwin Park and I believe that the other neighborhoods surrounding have met with Gary. We've seen the plans, and I don't speak for anyone but myself as a neighbor. So I guess at the end, what I recommend, I enthusiastically recommend to vote a yes. I'm encouraged by what the development is. I've bought my lotto ticket. If I win the lotto this weekend, I'm going to talk to Gary about possibly being an investor. I think this is a great thing for this site. It's a great thing for Farragut. It's something that's needed, and I think it fits on this property really well. So I ask that when this application comes up for a vote, that you vote yes with the condition that the land use type be changed to civic institutional, and I look forward to welcoming the villages as a neighbor. Thank you.
Our other speaker is Harry Moskos.
Harry Moskos, 405 East Fox Den. I just want to say that I fully support the assisted living project. I did attend their earlier meeting. I have no issues with it. The only issue I'm concerned about is the remaining acreage, that somehow that does not get changed at some point to apartments, which you have to go through the whole thing again. But as far as this project, I think it's A-OK, and I hope it succeeds. In fact, I hope they take the rest of the acreage. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I think Gary wants to say something.
Thank you. It's been a great experience working through this with all of our neighbors. And I want to go back to a first meeting on this site with Mark and staff, and Mark called this a community builder. I had not heard. This will be my 71st senior community, and I've never been called a community builder. We've tried to take that to heart, and I think this would be a great part of the overall Farragut community, and it's especially with our neighbors to the north. We had neighborhood meetings on Monday and Tuesday of this week, had about 60 attendees, including Roseanne, and it was very beneficial. Learned some feelings, things like dirt, dust, what you've heard in terms of connectivity and fear of connectivity, and all the things that you as planning commissioners usually will hear. I do want to share with you the three main areas that the neighborhood meetings came out of the meetings, and I actually have them on a Post-it note board, but I won't post it. One you've already discussed, and that is the land use policy reflecting the civic institutional status. The second, concern over Smith Road. Our traffic load and traffic study is minimal, but Smith Road is a problem. And a lot of concern that if it is a connector, that should just be an emergency only type connector. And then the third is the land use policy, pedestrian connectivity, connecting to Waverly Court. Significant discussion about that by the Waverly Court residents, and I think that's something that as we go through the process we need to listen to and pay attention to. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions that I can answer for you.
Are they wanting connectivity into their development?
It's a divided feeling at this point.
Oh, okay. All right.
Gary, I have a question
Yes,
for
ma'am.
you. The villas that are on Smith Road, along Smith Road, those face Smith Road, don't
Yes,
they?
ma'am.
Okay. And your build-out time frame is what for this?
I will say no less than 8 years, maybe no more than 10 to 12 years. But we don't want to get ahead of our residents.
And I assume, obviously, that the assisted living portion here
That
in the
would be
center
first.
is the first.
Yes.
And then the memory care.
Yes.
And then
We'll-
the villas around. Now, are you going to start on the backside there by Waverly Court and et cetera, or do you know?
Really, the villas that immediately would be north of the assisted living, which is really in between Waverly and Baldwin on the undeveloped property, would be what would be the first group of villas.
Okay.
And if you can imagine building then the south loop and then the west loop that would come around and connect to Smith Road.
Okay. Now, I don't want to get ahead of everything here, but in looking at just the landscaping aspect of this, over an 8-10 year period, that's a long period of time. And have you given thought to starting your landscaping projects in advance of
Yes.
this building? So
Yes.
you get some maturity?
It's been our practice. It takes a long time for landscaping to catch up with building. So where we can get to finish grading, for example, along the buffer lines, we go ahead and get that triggered early in the first phase. Maybe we can get a year or two of growth out of a couple of seasons before even the first building opens.
And I'm going to ask, are we going to, I have questions too about the plan itself, but I wanted to get back to the zoning because I have some questions on this part of the zoning.
That's fine with
so-
me if that's what
Okay.
we want to stick to.
Yeah, I'd like to,
Yeah.
because I have some points I'd like to make on that too.
May I- To that, I'd like to offer one comment because I hear the angst from my neighbors too over what might happen. It's my commitment that we will close on the property before second reading at BOMA. So it either disappears before we get through BOMA and falls apart because we haven't closed, or we have closed and we have a property that Doug can count on is zoned and we have closed. So that would answer also the land use policy. So I think if that could be hand in hand with that, then both of those will be answered at the same time.
I defer to you.
All right, can we move to the rezoning issues we have on the front of this property where Peterson Road comes in? Because I have a lot of questions about that
We'll have
part.
to take a break at 9, just remember that.
Okay, all right. Want to take a break now?
It looks like it's time for the tape to take a break, so.
Okay.
We can take it now if you want, I suppose. Not sure if that's a
Yeah,
problem.
why don't we take it now, Mark?
Before we get started, yeah. Okay, that'll be fine.
Good idea, I'm ready.
I don't know how long it is that
I'm glad you got questions about that.
Hot potato. So you're telling me when you ride and you have two people, you're not supposed to ride in tandem? You're supposed to ride side by side?
The law says you can ride side by side
But somebody's going to
and you got, and
ride.
all in here.
Yeah, let's get this done.
It looks like a black snake.
Because this is,
Okay, we'll re-adjourn the meeting at this time.
Where'd everybody go?
they're out in the hallway.
All right.
Are we ready to go? John, I had some questions, and it might be easier to put up the drawing with the road coming through there.
Yeah, okay.
Because essentially what it looks like from that, we are now creating what looks like to me four distinct parcels.
Yes, ma'am.
By bisecting that. My concern is with the front, the one, when you're driving onto Peterson Road that will be to your left, because that seems like a very narrow lot to me. Is that still usable? Are we rendering
That's
that?
honestly, that's debatable at this point. We don't have an intended use, nor do we know that with the buffer requirements and setback requirements that we can make a use there.
Well, I know we're looking at changing our commercial so that you can have buildings 20 feet setback from the front.
Well, that would be beneficial to us, but honestly, at this point, we've contemplated on what can we actually do with that piece of property. With staff recommendations, this is by cleaning up the rezoning with this request, it makes it simpler, especially with the problem is how Peterson is stubbed out currently. And by matching that, and we've snaked it a little bit to divide the property, this is the best intended layout that we could come up with.
That's my concern. I don't really want to leave them with a piece of property that's not usable. And
But
I
we-
guess that's my concern.
We would prefer, I don't know in time what Farragut Press will become, if it'll be there forever, but we would prefer the east side to be more developable than the west. And we know there's a lot of, Doug donates public events, and he even quoted today that the western portion, we could remain public events till whatever time.
Okay, so
He has no designation to do anything on that entire corridor at this time.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that you're comfortable with how that is, because clearly that's going to be a tough piece of property to do
Correct.
something with.
I don't know another way around it with where Farragut Press is now and the hangar that's behind it. There's not a lot of manipulation that you can make in that little corridor.
Okay,
Yeah, 'cause
So
you have to-
we've reviewed that, but we're just we're tied into it.
okay.
Yeah, you have to make sure you're not creating a setback violation with the new right-of-way.
I understand that.
In relation to the building.
I guess that's why I'm struggling with that, because it's kind of leaving you guys with a piece of property that, what do you do with it? even with our these new considerations with setbacks, I'm not sure that you can fit a building on that with the reasonable parking lot. I guess that's what my biggest question was. So when we look at this, that's going to be something where we're going to have to assign new parcel descriptions to all of these when we talk about rezoning? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that
not
public right of way
rezoning.
divided, it will become 4 parcels, that's
yes.
correct.
Be part of your plating process, yeah, that's right.
But they exceed the 1 acre minimum
Yeah,
requirement?
yeah, yeah.
That's what we made sure of as well, per Mark's recommendations.
Yeah, it has to be at least an acre, yeah. If you're
For?
creating commercial or
Okay.
office.
All
yeah.
right. And I know that we're talking about the back properties being office.
Well, that's just one point of discussion. I mean, like I say, this area, there's actually, I mean, this area here is basically a sliver of commercial. Then you've got the buffer zone.
Yeah.
Then you got R2. And what they're looking at, one of the options that we were talking about, and this is office here currently,
Okay.
is making that office commercial since it's down closer to Kingston Pike, and then this office to transition back to this S1. One thing to think about with that is if you look at the overall zoning map, let me go back to that. just to, so people are aware of it. One of the objectives of the town has been to try to not have continuous commercial along Kingston Pike, and so have a break. You've got that in Fox Den down there to the west, and then we've got this section of office here where the Farragut Press is, and on the south side of Kingston Pike. In fact, we've had someone ask for a commercial zone, I think, on part of this, and, you know, we kept it office. So that's something to think about. Maybe that needs to remain as office and just incorporate the commercial into the office. It wouldn't affect the Farragut Press. If they wanted to do something in the future, they could always request a rezoning for that. And then, so basically, what I'm talking about there is that another option would be just to make all that office, you know, the buffer and the commercial office.
For the property to the west of that is zone commercial, but it is used more of in an office
Yeah,
capacity.
that's you got the funeral home, and then you got an office development.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw this idea out. I'm not married to it, but I don't know that I have an issue with the rear portion of that because the properties are so small, having that commercial, mostly because it would be an opportunity for smaller businesses to be there where that these, and it obviously because of where it's situated, it would serve the people that live in that particular, that's the idea of it. So that's my thought is, I don't know that I'm against the idea of commercial on that rear property. I understand with the church being there, there's going to be some setback issues. I don't know if it's even realistic to consider that commercial with the issues with the 35-foot, I believe it's a 35-foot buffer that's going to be between commercial and R2. Have you guys given any thought to that?
Just basic discussions with Mark, and since we had C1s on western and eastern portions of property, I initially said, why don't we make it C1 back to the back? And it all came up due to the fact that we have so many different transitions of zones that mean nothing. It's on a piece of, corridor of property. So because we were dividing the right-of-way to a public right-of-way, dedicating back to the town, staff wanted to recommend to clean it up. And this was our compromise to do half and half. We felt office was a good intended use, butting up to the S1. That's something, we don't have a use whatsoever for that property at this point, honestly.
I guess what I'm trying to say is I am open to some flexibility. You are basically getting stuck with a lot that there isn't much you can do with. And I think we need to be cognizant of that. in the future.
Correct.
What you can do with this property now that it's been bisected and, by a road and,
Well, the ways the Peterson was extended when the Ingalls came in, it kind of directs towards the northwest. It's
Yeah.
not really a straight alignment.
Yeah.
So to turn it back, that's why you've got that very narrow band
Yeah.
of the proposed commercial zone, which we realize is, I don't know how we can make a use out of it.
yeah.
Well, it sounds like to me that maybe we're getting close to talking about mixed-use neighborhood,
Yeah.
kind of a
Future.
use, you know.
Yeah. That's what the future land use map is for the southernmost part of that, where the office area is mixed-use neighborhood, which a
But still-
small-scale commercial building might fit in.
You're going to be very restricted to parking, and, I mean, it's going to
Yeah.
be very tight.
Well, I'm thinking about the walking from the Farragut, from the Gary's development, Good Works development.
And I guess that's what my questions were. You kind of confirmed where I was thinking this is a struggle here. And it's just something we need to be mindful of as we move
Struggle
forward.
right now.
Yeah, initially, we didn't want to complicate what Gary's proposing, but this came about due to the infrastructure that was going to
Yeah.
be proposed to service it, and that's when town staff recommended that we needed to address these items as well within the submittal. So that's why they're on
Okay,
for this workshop.
yep.
I, for one, can envision some buildings that are pulled closer to the road along Peterson, the new right-of-way, with parking kind of around the perimeter. With the O1, you'd have a 25-foot setback up against the church, and then the C1, you'd have a 35-foot. So, I mean, I think it's a really good proposed use. Something else, an observation that I received via email today that has to do with the traffic generation. This particular project actually generates 23 fewer trips per day than as if it was developed under the zoning that is there today. Or 23 trips with the future zoning, fewer trips than what would be permitted or eligible under the zoning day. So I applaud you because the traffic has always been a sticking point with this particular project and mostly with Smith Road. And here we are with a rezoning that actually reduces the total number of trips than if it was otherwise just built out as another single-family detached residential subdivision. So it's just a nice observation that I wanted to share with maybe some of the folks that didn't have the traffic summary.
I think related to one of the items coming up, dealing with this more flexibility in the front yard, that would benefit this property a whole lot. And it would also provide for, as you're entering into Gary's development, it gives it this kind of village feel as you're coming into the development. So that's a great advantage of changing the C1, O1, and hopefully the C2 to allow for that kind of flexibility. This is a perfect example of how it would enhance a project and enhance the entranceway into that larger development, I think.
A lot prettier to look at buildings pulling in than just parking lots.
Yeah, exactly.
And so here it is, you got dimensions on parcels which are challenging, and so they're really perfect candidates for one of the items we're talking about later tonight.
Can I ask a real quick question? I think I know the answer. The stormwater, is that stormwater? What is that, the drainage going through there? That doesn't impact any of the setbacks, that easement, that
You're talking about the detention ponds?
no, the
Talking about this ditch through here in the middle.
the thing that's, what is that, what is?
Oh, it's
yes.
sanitary sewer.
Sanitary sewer. That doesn't impact any of the setbacks or anything? It's just included in there?
Well, they're working around it with their plan, and so, I mean, it's a
You can't put
obstruction
any-
to them.
yeah,
And so,
you-
but they've done a good job of basically the angle in that parking lot of trying to route all their buildings around that sanitary sewer easement.
Okay.
You just can't put a building over the easement. Typically, they're 15 feet wide. I don't remember that one,
Okay.
whether it's 15, but
They could move it, it would just be a real expensive sewer line to move.
Yeah, because it currently services Waverly Court, so
Right.
it would be very challenging.
But I'm meaning really, it runs along that property line where we're talking about right now with the commercial and the office. It won't impact their setbacks like parking lots, and does it? Or
No, you can put a parking lot over that easement. You just can't build a building on top of that
Okay.
easement.
Okay.
But they are going to have, unless the church rezones, they are going to have a buffer
Yep.
that backs up to the Church of Christ. Again, it'll be 25-foot buffer in the O1 area and a 35-foot buffer in the C1 area. And that pretty much is kind of where that sewer easement is now, is where that buffer is going to be.
Repeat that, Noah.
They're going to be required, due to the fact that the church is zoned R2, they're going to be required to have a vegetated buffer that is on the west side of this new drive. That's going to be up against the church property line, and basically on the O1 section, which is the northernmost section, the section that says 1.38 acres, that'll be a 25-foot buffer. And then where you got a little higher intensity use down on the southern section, which is that kind of new southwestern parcel that says 1.39 acres, that'll be a 35-foot buffer. And then the buffer will essentially evaporate when they're next to the funeral home property.
Yeah, there's no buffer here. There's no buffer there, yeah.
Louise, there's also a drainage swell that runs that property boundary as well, if you recall. That's going to hinder the ability to build
Yeah.
as well.
Okay.
This 35-foot setback here at the church is because of the current zoning of the
Yeah,
church?
R2. If you have residential and commercial, you have that.
And Mark, he could draw a line kind of where that is. It's going to be right on top of that, where the existing ditch is and where that sewer line is. So it's kind of an area you want to stay out of anyway. It'd be difficult to try to do anything with it because there's a fair amount of water that comes through that area right now.
I guess my main point is, I would not, I really don't want to render these lots useless, because with this community here, the mixed use or commercial, that would be a good place to have something that's it serves as a place for these people to walk, that they could do something, go get their hair done or something like that. So I guess that's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it lends itself to like a small village scale, buildings as you come into that entranceway, which ties in great with Gary's development. So, I mean, and having that flexibility in the setbacks would provide for that.
I agree. I think you could put some small shops in there. I mean, shops that are not a whole lot different than the shops that we looked at tonight at the corner of Campbell Station and Kingston Pike. The really small scale, the kind of 2,500 square foot to maybe 3,500 square foot. You're not going to put anything much larger than that because you just can't get the footprint to fit. But I think if you can do the math, maybe at your tight spot, you're 125 feet and you got a 20-foot setback and you got 35, so you can still make it fit. You can get. You got to think a 50 by 50 is 2,500 square feet. So you can, it is, it's not perfect. You're not going to get a McDonald's to fit there.
I'm okay with that.
But nevertheless, there's a lot of other things that you could definitely get to fit there.
Yeah. All right.
Consistent with the mixed-use neighborhood.
Yeah.
So, Mark, what is the proposed zoning for that?
Well,
what are you suggesting?
What they're what's proposed is that this area here would go to C1 from O1, then the C1 and B1, and part of the R2 would go to O1.
Okay.
This area here. Now there's a question about, you got a couple of, when you rezone this to S1, if that gets rezoned, you do have kind of this R2 up here and this R2 here, which don't have to be cleaned up necessarily, because they would be subject to probably a rezoning if they were ever part of a future development. But I do think it's important to try to clean up the parcels that would be along this Peterson Road extension, because that really needs to be taken care of, and ideally it needs to create kind of a potential for a built environment that would encourage a mixed-use neighborhood.
That was all I had for my questions on that.
Well, you know, the rezoning issue, let's see,
Want to move on to the concept plan?
it was basically the discussion issue only.
Yeah.
And we've gone over the next item, which is the concept plan.
I have a few things.
Great lengths, so, but
yeah.
we can, I think we can go to
I've got a
that
couple
now
of
and
speakers probably on the
vote
concept
on it.
plan, I believe.
Okay, they have
Whenever
speakers
we
on the
get to
concept
that.
Oh, I'm
Are
sorry.
you all comfortable with the O1C1? Do you think the R2 need to be cleaned up now, or is that something that could just be addressed in the future?
Mark, personally, well, personally, I think it would be nice if it was cleaned up, but I think it might be too hard to do and get something done in a reasonable length of time.
I think it will depend a great deal, won't it, Gary, on whether you and John, whether you and Mr. Horn can get together on some kind of an agreement for that.
Well, if they don't want that property,
And if they
yeah.
do, you know, then obviously it would be good to go ahead and clean it up, do it at the same time.
Incorporate it into the S1.
If you don't, then it's not as imperative that it be rezoned at this
yeah.
point. But, except to clean it up, and I
Yeah.
think it would look a lot better. It's gonna have to be done probably one time or another.
Yeah, it'll eventually be.
But I think it probably would be done if they end up ever rezoning R1. That would be the time.
Yeah,
If you leave
could
it
be.
like that, then you would want to.
I mean, you could rezone it, if you don't incorporate it into Gary's development in S1, you could rezone it into the R1 to the east if you wanted to. But,
It required to be done.
Imperative that it be done, though, at this point in time.
because you also have that tract just to the north of it between Waverly Court and Baldwin Park that's R2. It's a little sliver of property that currently makes sense because the S1 area is zoned R2, so.
That's
that would
next
be-
to Waverly Court there you're talking
Yeah.
about, right?
And they can stay the way they are. It's not necessarily doing any harm.
Yeah, I don't, because you could always they could end up looking at R1 and say, we know what, we want that to be R2, then they have to go back and.
Yeah,
Just,
could be.
I'm thinking, just leave it alone for now.
Unless they want to incorporate it in there.
Yeah.
So are y'all okay with the Peterson Road section, the O1 C1? Does that
Yes.
make sense? Okay.
Yes.
So we would probably just amend the request and, include that.
Now, are we
I'd
talking
like
about
to
the
ask a question.
C101, or are we still talking about the R1, R2? Personally, what I'd like to do is, for ease here, rezone the old Press Enterprise building and those two tracks along Kingston Pike to C1.
Okay.
The two new created tracks, basically from where the old hangar is, all the way up to the 22-acre assisted living parcel, rezone that to O1. So we're going to do away with the funny little C1 finger in there and
B1.
the buffer, the B1 finger,
Right.
and then rezone the 22 acres, and then leave these funny other little things to be dealt with
Yeah,
at a
that's fine.
future date when they decide how they want to develop the rest of
Yeah.
their site.
That's fine with
That's personally what I'd like to do.
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty good summary so far has been said.
That makes sense, yeah. Yeah, what I was saying is they just need to incorporate that into their rezoning request. What we were trying to do at this workshop session was to get feedbacks.
Right.
And so now that we have it, they'll just need to amend that and include that as part of the
Now, to
S1.
clarify for the applicant, you're talking about just the new 4 parcels that are
Yeah,
created.
yeah.
That's the
right.
clarification.
Yeah, because those are all tied to this development.
Mr. Baker, you understand where we're going with this? The C1 on the front, O1 in the middle, and then the S1. You guys are good to go with that?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Now, for my clarification, the L1 portion that we're talking about there,
Yeah.
that would be amenable to the mixed-use neighborhood kind of use?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. Now, I mean, the thing is, mixed-use neighborhood, we don't really, as you know, we've been talking about this, we
No,
don't
we
really
don't
have a zoning district
Right.
that provides for it. You could build buildings like offices or small commercial buildings that would maybe have a village look to them. They wouldn't necessarily be mixed use because that typically is something that provides for both residential and or office or commercial.
Just not quite big enough to really
It's
do our
not,
mixed use
no.
idea that we have.
No.
There might be some small tenant, like a beauty shop, barber shop
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
with an apartment above it, I mean, a condo above it, you know. Kind of what I was
Well,
thinking.
you know, yeah.
I mean, we're
but-
open-minded to that. I think we probably just let the applicant work through that, and if they all of a sudden they have a beauty shop that wants to live upstairs, we can discuss it then. Unfortunately, it's not really eligible in the C1 and O1, but I do
Not
think it
currently.
does meet what we're talking about, trying to encourage some of that mixed use. I mean, heaven forbid somebody has to walk downstairs to go to work. And any rate, but I think we'll see kind of how the market forces prevail, and
Yeah.
if that's something
think
they
that's a
want
good
to
idea.
discuss, I think we can discuss that at a later
Always
date.
be other rezoning, right?
Yes, that's what, in other words, we're very open to that idea,
Yeah.
Mr. Baker.
Okay, so I think I got feedback on the rezoning, so that's good. We'll just go to the next item then.
Mark, you got all the information you need, I hope.
I think I have on the rezoning. We'll go to the concept plan. I do have a couple of people that are wanting to speak on that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And we've already talked about this, of course, a little bit. And I guess unless you have a question, you know, that's what the concept plan is at this point. The comments that we had on the plan itself were at your places. Of course, this would all be contingent on the rezoning getting approved. Then there were 8 comments there that we would recommend the approval be subject to those. And like I say, I do have a couple of people that have asked to speak, and I guess if you want, I'll just go ahead and call them up. Is that okay? We've got Paul Johnson.
Paul Johnson, 344 Bernie Circle. And, you know, I'm fairly close to this development. We've lived at that location now for over 2 years. The proposal that we had looked at a little over a year ago with the apartments just didn't fit Farragut in this location. This plan for a senior living center is far superior and will do Farragut a whole lot more to have that facility in this location. So I would greatly support I am supporting this development. I am a retired geographer. And some people get geography and geology mixed up, but geographers look at interactions of humans with the land. And this concept plan is a good example of how planning should take place in Farragut. The interconnectivity of the roads are so much better. You know, one of the problems I have with living in Baldwin Park is we've got 2 ways out. We can go down the little old narrow boring road that, you know, needs to be widened at some point in the future, which I know it's going to be a little down the future. It's not going to be in the next year or so. Or we can go out to Smith Road, which is boring road's nice and wide over to Smith Road. Making right-hand turn on the Smith Road isn't too bad. Making a left-hand turn to go down to Kingston Pike can be kind of dangerous because of the hill. The visibility isn't much. With this plan, and if some point in the future the land between Baldwin Park and Waverly Court get developed, there'll be an interconnection that we could then go through that development and get down to Kingston Pike and alleviate traffic from Smith Road. So having a plan like this improves connectivity, even though it may be in the future before it comes to fruition. Also, a few days ago, my wife and I, we went for a little hike down the narrow boring road, went through the old Ingalls development, new Ingalls development, and stopped in the Ingalls. We didn't buy anything at that time, but wandered back around, had to go back up Smith Road all the way back up to Boring. You know, if I had to run down and pick up a pound of butter or something for my wife, with this development coming in, we'll have greenway connections. And instead of taking an hour to make a round trip around Boring, Kingston Pike, Smith Road back to Boring, you know, we can be down to Ingalls, and, you know, by the time now it takes me to walk over to the Boring stables from where my house. This is going to greatly improve everything. I mean, this plan is fantastic. And, you know, I just want to make you understand, you know, a year ago I was up here talking against the apartment complex, but I said I'm not against development. And today I'm here telling you that this plan, you know, is really great. It's something we need for Farragut. Thank you.
Thank you.
The other speaker is Gary Snyder.
Thank you. I'm Gary Schneider, 243 Fordham Way in Waverly Court. Have lived there for the past 19 years. Retired from the University of Tennessee, and where you might have been, you are a geologist or a geographer. I'm an environmental scientist. Forestry, wildlife, fisheries, my background for over 40 years. We're the neighbor immediately to the north, and have been concerned with rezoning and development of this property from the first time that we heard about that process going on. Gary mentioned that he met with some of the homeowners, and on Tuesday night he spent a couple of hours with us at the Waverly Court complex, and we had a pretty good turnout. Well over 2/3 of our residents were there and listened to the entire plan that Gary has. To compare Continental Properties proposal with this is, it's 180 degrees. There is no comparison. We have always been at Waverly Court concerned with zoning, with traffic on Smith Road, with the view shed as we would look south towards any development that we have. We know the elevation will drop and what have you, but with two-story multi-dwelling that had been proposed, that would have been right in our face. This particular concept proposal that Gary is coming along with from Good Works, again, seems to be something that fits very, very nicely. One thing that has been talked about a little bit, skirted, is drainage issues. And the concept here, there's going to be a relatively large pond there that captures much of the drainage with fountains and whatever, and that alleviates a bunch of drainage problems that we have experienced in Waverly Court. The transition, we really like this transition idea of the commercial to the office to S1, this civic functionality, institutional type of a thing. Gosh, that's kind of what, in my mind, Farragut began with way, way back when the founders was looking at this very sort of thing, and has made us all come out here to be residents and live and enjoy this place. So again, I, for one, think this proposal takes in all of the environmental issues very, very nicely, and I think we should support this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I find that very lifting to hear positive comments.
I have one concern I have, and I'm not sure if anyone from Baldwin Park was noticing that. The future access that stubs out right at the eastern side of the property, I get so confused on my directions, that it makes it look like the road is going to, not that one, straight out. Yes. There would be a road that falls right behind Baldwin Park, and I'm not entirely sure that I would want to live behind a road. So my thought is maybe we curve that so that you're bringing the road elsewhere, or stub it off so that you have a potential to redirect it. That's my concern. That is the one concern I have about the plan.
Yeah, actually adding some curvature to that road probably is a good thing, similar to that, and that would direct it southward, southeast.
And it kind of runs parallel to those rear property lines in Baldwin Park as well.
You have kind of a straight shot through the development, which probably is not ideal, but you don't have a lot of traffic going through there. But that's a good idea, I think, to turn it southeast.
And I know that there was some discussion, I'm not sure where Baldwin Park got on that, where they, connecting their greenway to the sidewalk or greenway that's going to be in here. I don't know where you guys stood on that. But it's going to, the problem is right now, the property ends where the greenway comes in from Baldwin Park, comes into that R2 property that is in between Baldwin Park and Waverly. So I'm not sure that we even have an option to connect them right now. Do we?
That lot right there by that greenway is my house, and the walking trail comes down just on the other side of that lot where it's kind of cut off right there.
Okay.
So our belief from when we talked to Gary was that would be connected as part of this development. There's a pretty good tree line there, but the walking trail is supposed to go there. And I believe if you look at the map and the land use plan that talks about walking trails, I believe there was also a plan to run a walking trail along the back of the property line at Baldwin Park and around up the other corner, and tie back in up by the boring stable somewhere. That's obviously not until something's developed, but there's a pretty good tree line behind that rear property line of Baldwin Park that would have to be taken into consideration, particularly for that road. And so it would be good to turn that road to the southeast if possible, to allow for a greenway to be extended over if we wanted. But I think from my discussions with the Baldwin Park residents, we would actually like to have that connected. That would give us access to pass through that neighborhood, walking, bicycling, to go down to Ingalls, the pharmacies on the corner, or to give us a different access to Kingston Pike and keep us off of Smith Road and the back road over on Boring. So.
Not knowing how that lot in between you and Waverly Park would, or Waverly Court, I'm sorry, would develop, is it possible to run the walk along that property line? Is that something? Then you're not impinging on however you end up developing that.
That's a good point. I think they were trying to avoid those trees, is why they were putting it on the west side.
Is it so dense that you couldn't put a path in between those trees? I don't know how dense those trees are.
Yeah, I think the game plan is that we will have a permanent easement between the property that we're rezoning as S1 and Baldwin Park and Waverly Court, because we have the same issue on the west, center west, because we'll be going where you see the future road coming up there.
Yeah.
You'll see a sidewalk going up with their tennis court. If we come into Waverly, we need to come in on the north side of the tennis court.
Okay.
So we would go up their eastern property line.
Okay.
And make a left turn in. So it'd be better to let that do its own thing, do an easement across to Baldwin through the balance of the property.
Okay.
On the east side.
All right.
Of course, you have a little different issue, don't you, Gary, with Baldwin Park and Waverly Court, in that Waverly Court's a gated community.
Yes, it's a
And
fenced
Baldwin
gated
Park
community.
isn't. Right.
that'll be something that's what I was
Got another
suggesting
issue.
earlier, needs to have some process done with that neighborhood.
Okay.
One future road connection might skirt through that, and then that could put the walking trail on the east side, which you could meander through trees easier than you could the road. It wouldn't be in Baldwin Park's development. It would just, what I was thinking about there was if you brought the road, the vehicular access through that gap of trees,
Okay.
might be able to include a walking trail on the east side of that, and just kind of
So is that-
snake it through
Is
the
that
trees.
vehicular access there, or is that a sidewalk there, or is that? Okay, that just,
Vehicular access is up near
that's what I was
Waverly
thinking.
Court, isn't
Yeah.
it, Mark?
That's what I thought.
Oh, yeah, I guess that is just a sidewalk. It would be good to have a vehicular access there.
Be better.
You've already got one on the west side.
Yeah,
Be better to have it there than near Waverly Court.
Oh, wow. I don't have a dog in that fight.
Sounds like a NIMBY.
yeah, I mean, it would be good to have the connectivity. It shows one there, and I was guess I was misreading that. I was thinking there was one there.
So we're being mindful that we're going to try and connect these trails. I guess that was my main question. Okay.
We'd be cognizant of when this property to the north develops, we'd try to meander the road away from the existing developments.
Okay.
I mean, we'd certainly be conscientious of what's around there, the context, and try to lessen that impact. But I think having that connectivity really in both of those locations would be desirable.
Going to make those kind of plans, then why would you want to stub that out there on the east side of Waverly Court?
Well, I mean, that's something that you could look at. As far as tree cover, it probably makes more sense if you're just having one connection to the north for it to go through this section. So,
Well, and their
yeah,
tennis
maybe just
court is
have-
right there. You could probably get the road to come through so that it doesn't pull it away from Waverly Court, I would think.
That's my thought, is you wouldn't want that road running right next to our tennis court.
Well, we'd have to, like I said earlier, we'd want to, when this property to the north develops, you'd want to kind of
That becomes
meander it
access.
away.
Their tennis court is right here. But I would think it'd be better running behind a tennis court than somebody's home, I guess is my.
I agree.
I agree.
The problem is their homes
That's
near
what I
the
mean.
tennis court.
That's what I mean.
What Mark's saying is he can then kind of take it and diagonally kind of
Curve it.
veer it off whenever that next phase
Yeah.
of that property develops in the future.
Yeah.
Instead of running it right parallel, snug up against the property line.
Yeah, because you would want it to have curvature anyway, so.
Curvature anyway, so you
Yeah.
want to curve it away. So the only thing impacted is, yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Those were my concerns.
Okay. Anybody else? Any of that?
All right, this one's,
This is for a vote if you're comfortable with that. Of course, the rezoning is not up for a vote until next month, so timing-wise, it doesn't really make a big difference.
well,
Have
let's,
have they reviewed the subject twos?
yes.
And you're okay with the subject twos? Do we want to just make a motion? Move to approve concept plan for Villages of Farragut with the subject twos?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Got a couple more discussion items. One of them is discussion on the request to amend front yard setback provisions and discussion on a request to amend front yard setback provisions in commercial zoning districts. MBH Inc. applicant, and we had a lot of discussion on it in the last meeting. It's still for discussion, so.
Let me just go through this briefly here. Obviously, the staff strongly supports this request. We, in fact, when we were looking at this a little more and trying to think about this more comprehensively, we tried to pick out some of what we felt were the best provisions in a number of our zoning districts that reflected a lot of the provisions in our architectural design standards and in our plan, and are kind of proposing those as well in this draft language. So we're certainly supportive of revisiting the front yards, the setbacks to provide more flexibility. We had an example just tonight of where that kind of flexibility could create a more desirable build environment in a tight space. And we also would support adding some of the language that we have in the new S1 and part of the BD4 zoning district that deal with, you know, some clarifications on accessory structures, screening requirements for surface parking. That's all recommended in the architectural design standards. Providing for context-appropriate streetscape and outdoor open space, similar to what Mr. Keckley's development showed, connectivity, and low-impact development. And these would all be based on whether they're appropriate for the context. There's going to be situations where connectivity wouldn't make any sense just because of the context, and that language is built into what we're proposing. The staff would strongly support this language being included and expanded to the regional commercial. I wasn't at the discussion last month, but my understanding was it primarily was talking about the general commercial and office. But if we're going to try to promote a built environment along, for example, Outlet Drive, which is Zone C2, that would be consistent with our architectural design standards, we would have to provide for the kind of flexibility that's being requested in these zoning amendments as far as the front yard. You can see here that, and this is like a hypothetical build out of Outlet Drive extension. The buildings are obviously pulled up closer to Outlet Drive with the parking in behind, so that the presentation from Outlet Drive, you're looking at nice, you know, looking buildings rather than a large parking lot. You've got this, you know, community open space. You've got good connectivity within and outside of the development. All those things we're proposing to include as ordinance provisions in C1, C2, and O1, because we feel that having them in the ordinance just gives us some extra ability to promote our architectural design standards and provide for a built environment that is unique for Farragut and is high quality. So I don't know how you all feel about the language that we've put together here, and we can also talk a little bit about I was also thinking a little bit outside the box with the parking and loading section. And, you know, we've been talking about with some of these site plans that have come before us, dividing the parking lot into smaller pods. And one thing, just for consideration, you may or may not want to do this, but we currently have a provision that you can have 15 parking spaces in a row, and then you have to have a landscaped island. If you're wanting to divide that even into smaller pods, what the staff's suggesting is to consider lowering that to 10 parking spaces, and then you have to have a landscape island. That would, again, provide ordinance language that would encourage these smaller pods rather than, you know, large rows of parking spaces without landscaping. So that's just something also to consider with this request, and I apologize to Noah, we've kind of expanded this request way beyond
Yeah, that wasn't on my application.
what yeah, but I think they're all, to me, they're good recommendations. I think they make a lot of sense. They give people a lot more flexibility, and I think they promote built environment that we're looking at here on the screen. It's in our architectural design standards. Does anybody have any comments or feedback on that?
I have a quick question.
Yep.
In our BD4, we do a calculation for building setback.
Yeah.
Why did we move away from that?
Well, the big difference in the BD-4 is we allow up to a 70-foot tall building.
Right.
And so in the zoning districts that we're talking about tonight, the maximum height is 35 feet.
Okay.
So the concerns that some folks had, one of the planning commissioners in particular, was that you'd have a canyon effect. Obviously, a 70-foot tall building is going to be a more significant
I got you.
lack of the right word here, but nevertheless, that was the reason why we didn't use that funny formula from the BD-4.
Okay.
Is because, quite frankly, you cannot build a building taller than 35 feet in C1, O1, and is regional commercial
Yeah,
35 feet also?
You can go up in regional commercial, but you have to set the building back a foot.
For every foot.
For every foot you go above the 35 feet.
Okay.
Up to 50 feet.
So
Now,
that's pretty similar to the language that we used in BD-4.
yeah, it is. And then since that time, we've also adopted the architectural design standards, which help with addressing the tunnel effect, because it talks about building offsets, and so you're not looking at a big canyon wall from the street, because we don't want that either, and that's not what I'm talking about here. We're talking about just the ability to bring the buildings up closer to the street, engage the street, but not make it look like you got a bunch of, towers there just right at the street edge. That's not the intent at all. And the design standards address that and provide for ways of mitigating that, when you have that situation come up.
On these non-roof structures, you're basically talking about outside cafes and things like that.
Yeah,
areas.
yeah. That's the same language that we have in S1.
Okay.
Again, we're trying to encourage and not inhibit someone from, trying to engage that public realm. So you're giving them a little bit more flexibility.
So you're putting this 20 feet off, say, Kingston Pike?
From the edge of the right-of-way, correct?
If somebody wanted to do that, and it's from the right-of-way, not from the street, not from the curb.
As we see with the Russell House, how far is that from?
I don't know how far that is from the right-of-way.
I bet it's closer than 20 feet. I bet it's probably 9 feet.
I mean, the building that we looked at first
Sidewalk,
tonight.
baby. There's a sidewalk. I walked up to the Russell House. There's a 3-foot sidewalk in front of the house, approximately. It looks like there's a 5-foot one on Kingston Pike.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
Maybe about 10 feet green area. It's scary. Traffic is zooming by there.
Well, this is just an option. It
If
doesn't
we
say
ever
you
use
have
that
to
as
do
a
that.
museum, you cannot use the front of that building as an entrance. You'll have to have it from the back for safety reasons.
Yeah.
And we'll probably need to do that for ADA anyway when we develop that building, or try to redevelop for the town, whether it's a museum or anything else.
As
But
I talked-
obviously, we don't envision anything that close, but I don't think they envisioned 150 years ago that building would be that close to Kingston Pike.
You're not going to be building everything.
Well, the
That's
road's
true.
what's changed. The building hadn't changed. We got too many, and that goes back to the whole point of connectivity. And that if you have good connectivity, the need to widen roads is reduced. So that it's all interrelated. But what he's talking about is just the ability, if a developer wants to, in an appropriate context, just similar to what we looked at tonight with that rezoning for Gary Keckley. Giving somebody the ability to have the flexibility to move it closer to the street if it made sense in the context. So we don't currently we have a disincentive to move.
We have a penalty currently the way that it's set
you've
up.
got a 20-foot setback for the parking lot.
But a 40 for the building.
Yeah, so effectively it makes you have to put your parking lot 40 feet back.
What,
So,
Miss Betty, one of the things that we've really tried to determine, that's the common theme with what we're doing, is we're trying to emphasize the architecture and de-emphasize the parking lot. And the best way to do that is to put the parking lot behind the building. There are some cases when there's redevelopment, and one that we looked at last month was the auto parts store, where you had 3 1-acre parcels all lined up along Kingston Pike, 2 of which are built under traditional design, which is Knoxville Strip Mall, parking lot in the front, building in the back. And that would be probably a pretty good scenario that we'd say, hey, it probably doesn't make sense, especially with connectivity, trying to interconnect the parking lots, to force feed this new design philosophy on that particular piece of property, because all of a sudden you would have 2 buildings pushed back under traditional design. And when I say traditional, I'm talking about 1980s strip mall design, maybe not, traditional may not be the right word. And then this new philosophy of pulling the building forward. And so that's one of the things that we really felt like some language needed to be in there with the Planning Commission, to give the Planning Commission some flexibility when maybe pulling the building towards Kingston Pike is not the most appropriate way of designing the site.
Okay, what is built in here that gives the Planning Commission, say somebody wants to come build a building right there, wants to have on Kingston Pike, we'll use that because it's the main one in town, or even Camel Station, traffic is getting to be unbelievable out here.
Right.
And they want to have an outdoor cafe 20 feet off Kingston Pike. What in this, what leverage does town have to say, our ordinance says this, but no, that's too close. We don't need people eating right here. And I know Annette last time said it was kind of scary jogging down Kingston Pike on those sidewalks.
I can actually probably address that. You could actually build an outdoor cafe dining area right now within this same setback, 20 feet off of Kingston Pike.
That's right.
Now, and that's before there's any text amendments, under the zoning today. Now, what we would hope is that good practice, and the tenant who ultimately is going to go in there and pay the rent is going to say, hey, why would I want my patio right next to all this traffic noise? And when the landlord has to digest that, the landlord will say, surely there's a better way for an outdoor patio. But again, it is permissible today, and we hope people make the right decisions, but I think those are some of the things that this body has exercised some common sense in the past and steered somebody towards making a better decision. What language to put in there sometimes is difficult, because again, you could do that today and you could do that in the future with an outdoor dining area or an outdoor patio, but I think this body's done a pretty good job. When we see things that just don't make any sense, we pipe up and say, hey, let's look at some alternatives here. And by and large, most of the applicants work with us and come up with something that's a little bit better, because if they see something that we don't like, then they start thinking, well, maybe my tenant's not going to like it. If my tenant doesn't like it, maybe their customers aren't going to like it. And ultimately, they're the ones that pay the bills.
Yeah, if it's a problem, they're not, I would think, the developer's not going to do it anyway because it's not going to be marketable. It's a market-driven thing. What I'm trying to do is provide them with the flexibility to, adjust to the market and market demands, because they're not probably going to do something or put that kind of setting out there if they envision that no one's going to use it, and they're going to know the context, when they develop the property. But we can also give them guidance if they don't understand that, for example, and hopefully they'll heed that advice.
Tonight was
Hope is not a plan.
Well, I'll say
We
a good example is tonight, one of the comments that we made, that the staff made with the assisted living developer on the previous item, was to take the garages on the homes that are facing Smith Road and make them rear entry garages. Because quite frankly, as of the view corridor going up Smith Road, you probably get a little prettier view with having these rear entry garages versus front entry garages. And the developer looked at it and said, hey, that makes sense. And then the plan we saw tonight had been revised to show that change. And so I think that's pretty typical when we have applicants, and even though we don't require them to have a rear entry garage, we felt like that would be better for the community and make more sense. And then the developers seemed pretty pretty happy to oblige us.
I will say this, if somebody built a outdoor patio on Kingston Pike, I'm not sure that I would sit there, so, at some
it's
point,
death sentence.
you can build it, but they won't come, so, I know what your concern is, but it sounds like they can already do that in our current zoning. I have a question for you. The pods, you were talking about parking pods.
Right.
That's not in the proposed language yet?
It's just open for discussion. I mean,
Okay.
again, one of the problems I've been running into on these site plans is that I think personally 15 spaces in a row without an island is not a small pod. And that's why I would narrow that down to 10 to provide for more breaks in surface parking so that you've got more landscaping, even more than we have required historically, and we require more than any place that I know of. But I think that's a good thing. I think it adds value to the project. And that's all I'm saying. I don't know if y'all want to pursue
Probably
that.
cut
but
down on the number of parking places
that's
possibly.
that's the offset,
Yeah.
yeah.
On
This is-
smaller properties.
Yeah.
This is my concern with that, and it's just something, I'm thinking of the properties we were just talking about that are going to be, they're going to have a hard time getting a building on there. And if we're making it more difficult to get parking in there, I guess that's my concern, is are we considering that in?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought about that. Yeah. I mean, that's why it's just a discussion item. It's something to think about, because I think if we're revisiting these zoning districts and some of our design standards, I'm trying to look at it a little more holistically.
Okay.
And if there's things that we can encourage in our zoning ordinance to promote our design standards, I think that makes our job easier, because it's a requirement in our ordinance as opposed to just a standard.
No, how does that impact that discussion on what you're proposing here?
Well,
What do you think?
You do lose some spots. There's no doubt about it. I mean, typically we like to design 15 with a 10. So whereas the minimum right now is 15 with a 5, or actually 20 with a 5, or 20 with a 10. And,
Okay, explain to me what that means, 20 with a 10.
Well, you have two options as it's laid out today. The options are you can do 15 spaces in a row and put a 5-foot wide island.
Okay.
And the downside to a 5-foot wide island is it really doesn't accommodate large canopy trees. You could put a crepe myrtle in it. You could put redbuds, dogwoods. You could put understory trees in it. But a 10-foot island does accommodate bigger shade trees. And we're talking about at maturity. And so what we'd like to do is we'd like to basically design the 15 parking spots in a row with a 10-foot island. Now, I have done some with 5, and again, I'm stuck with putting crepe myrtles in them. And we had a real hard freeze a couple of winters ago, and we struggled with a lot of our crepe myrtles, and so we're thinking maybe that wasn't the best choice. But I do get concerned that we already have pretty much the toughest parking lot island requirements in East Tennessee, and we're going to make them a little bit tougher with this. And I get concerned that quite often we have retailers whose parking requirements are greater than our parking requirements. Now, I'm not talking about the landscaping requirements. I'm talking about the actual number of parking spots. If we're dealing with a mixed-use strip mall and we're at 4.5 spaces per 1,000, and a retailer comes in and says, hey, restaurants are notorious for this, whereas a 6,000 square foot restaurant might want 100 parking spaces. And so you're thinking, well, gosh, that's a lot more than what the town requires. And so we're raising the bar that much higher for us in the town of Farragut. Again, if you go look at our parking lots that have been designed in the past 10 or 20 years and go look at anywhere else, there's a huge difference with the way our parking lots are because of the way they're broken up with the islands. Do we necessarily need to tighten that any further? I don't think so. I think we are putting a little bit undue burden out there. So I do caution against tightening that up any more than we already have. Because typically in the town of Farragut, if we're dealing with a reasonably level piece of property, we can get about 6,000 square feet of building per acre, including all the parking. If we go outside the town of Farragut into Knox County, that number moves up to like 8,500 square feet per acre. Now I'm taking into consideration all the open space requirements. Sometimes you have buffer requirements and our landscaping requirements. So I really do think we're going to reduce our overall density exactly where we may not want to reduce our overall density, and that is the catalyst that creates sales tax dollars for this community. And so that's the only part that gives me concern. I understand exactly what Mark is saying. Obviously, anytime you can break up parking lots, even the better, but I think we've done a great job in the town of Farragut of parking lot design and putting our islands in, using 5-foot wide islands where appropriate and 10-foot wide islands to try to accommodate for canopy trees and shade trees.
I mean, thinking about what you're talking about, and you make a lot of good points, which I've thought about those, and I'm not trying to make it harder on anybody, but you're right about the 5-foot island. That's been in the back of my mind for a long time. I'm wondering if that really is what we ought to look at and make that at 7.5 feet. And then if you got 20 spaces in a row, you could still do the 10, like it's currently worded.
I'm very much support that. Matter of fact, I won't do the 5-foot islands anymore. I just, they're just too difficult to work with, and
Exactly
knowing
right.
that whatever you plant in there, if you do plant a shade tree in a 5-foot wide island, you are sentencing that tree to death in about 5 or 10 years.
You have to be real selective of what you put in there. Yeah.
So 7.5 feet, I think I definitely would support that.
Yeah, I think that'd be
20
more.
parking places and 7.
Well, that would still be the same.
So we would leave the maximum number of contiguous parking spaces alone and just increase the width of the island to really encourage somebody to put a shade tree in. Because if you look through our ordinance, we actually have shade tree requirements for the islands, and the idea is to reduce some of the heat coming off of the asphalt and give a place for somebody to park in the summer and maybe get out of the heat. And so, and it does work well. You can look at Renaissance and you can see the areas where our big oaks have really done well, and then the smaller islands with the crepe myrtles, they're just kind of decorative. They really don't produce any shade.
Yeah, I think that's a needed change that really has been needed for a long time, because Noah makes an excellent point. The 5-foot island you have to be really careful what kind of shade tree you put in there. Crepe myrtles aren't a shade tree. And oftentimes they get topped, and then they have no value in the parking lot when that happens. So yeah, I think having 7.5 feet.
Well, even our street trees really do not do well with 5 feet. And when I talk about street trees, the ideal street tree when you think of Norman Rockwell is an elm tree. And we've done some elm trees in 5-foot grass strips over at Vista 15 years ago. And those elm trees have outgrown those 5-foot grass strips. So they weren't even being a city urban street tree, they were not a good choice for that particular location.
That's probably the best tree you could plant.
Right. Yeah. You can't. I mean, they're tough trees, and they do well with not having a whole lot of soil, because they're eventually going to get blocked in from all the asphalt and the subgrade below the street, and they're theoretically as good as you could have put in, and I probably regret doing those trees.
But isn't there a place for the 5-foot islands for just decorative purposes? I mean,
not if we want if we want a community of trees. And so, but yeah, if you want to put some shrubs or some bushes in them, I think that's fine. But I'm not. I think we're really trying to encourage more trees in the town, and we probably have really one of the toughest tree requirements, and that irrespective if you start with a wooded site or a field, we still have those tree requirements.
I'm just thinking about on a small area that where you don't have room for 10 feet or 7.5 feet wide. 5 feet islands might be useful for just decor.
Well, I think if you're dealing with a small area, then you're probably not going to have the requirement of having 15 parking spots in a row. And so it may not, I think it's kind of a moot point.
Well, that's probably right. I was thinking more about the reduction to 10 parking spaces rather than 15.
And maybe that's an option, maybe to have an either or. We have lots of either ors in our zoning ordinance, and I hate to add another one for the staff to have to interpret when they review these things. But You know, and there could be a case-by-case basis where somebody has, logistically, they just can't get a 7.5-foot island, and I think that would be an appropriate time to come to the Planning Commission and say, hey, I've tried to design it every which way I can. My curb face to curb face is this, and I'm trying to get a turnaround for a trash truck or whatever that is. And and I think that's something that this body has been pretty reasonable in the past.
I agree
with things like that, even though we try not to grant variances, but there are times when we look at things that are reasonable hardships and we say, yep, with that, we understand why you can't get a 7.5-foot island in there and 5 feet's enough.
I agree.
Okay, I have another about the 20-foot setback. Say on Kingston Pike, somebody comes in and wants to do it. Kingston Pike is built out all the way, most of the way, isn't it?
So 100-foot right away, the majority of it. There might be a few old parcels that might still be.
Talking about the road width, the functional road width. For now, for the most part, there is, for the most part, is what it is in the short term. Yeah.
Okay, and it doesn't have sidewalks all the way down it.
Not all the way. The eastern part, the older part, has some gaps, and we also don't have some in the west too in certain sections. We're hopefully we'll close the gap on the south side in the near future with the sidewalk in front of Willow Creek Golf Course.
But out west, it's still not connected out
No.
there.
I'm trying to figure out how you can have a sidewalk along Kingston Pike since there is no right-of-way, but on other roads, say Concord Road, that's a state road, right?
Mm-hmm.
The sidewalk could be built in the state right-of-way?
Typically, we try to encourage the sidewalks in the right-of-way. Sometimes you don't have a choice but to grant an easement. But most often, if you look around the town of Farragut, the vast majority of the sidewalks are already in the right-of-way, the public domain.
That's right.
And
I'd personally rather have a separated
green space.
multi-use path that's separated further from the road, personally. I think you feel better as a pedestrian if it's more safe. Now, we require on an arterial road like Kingston Pike, you have to have at least an 8-foot grass strip now between the curb of the road and the edge of the pedestrian facility. So that's way wider than what we used to require.
I know what we used to require certainly wasn't enough.
No.
But I'm trying to figure out where you can have green space if you have to have a sidewalk up by the building and a sidewalk down by the major road. How much that doesn't leave a whole lot of green space.
Yeah, I'm not really following. I mean, you have to show landscaped area between the building and the parking lot as part of your development.
If you have the front door facing the main road,
Yeah.
get to the front door, so you're going to have a sidewalk
Yeah.
to the front of the building. But you also may have a sidewalk down by the main road,
Yeah.
which may or may not be in the state right-of-way or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So what kind of architectural design can we have in that basically 10 feet?
Well, it'd be the landscaping design. I would doubt that the sidewalk next to the building would be 10 feet wide. But if we do a typical 4 or 5 foot wide sidewalk up against the building, you still have 14 or 15 feet till you get to the edge of the state right-of-way or the public domain, whether it's a state road or just a town of Farragut road. So you're still going to have a pretty significant strip of landscaping, whether it's grass or shrubs or flower beds, that's going to separate those two sidewalks. Ideally, my preference would be, I think good design would dictate trying to utilize one larger sidewalk instead of two parallel sidewalks. And I think you're going to do a lot better with connectivity and trying to encourage people to maybe even get a little even further away from the main, but we'll just pick on Kingston Pike because it's the predominant one in the town. But I think ideally you would have either using the Kingston Pike sidewalk and then have laterals going over to the entrances of the businesses instead of having these parallel sidewalks, or having a new sidewalk that's kind of equidistant, maybe closer to the edge of the right-of-way instead of being right up against Kingston Pike. It just depends on a case-by-case basis and how much separation you have, but I definitely favor the separation and getting it away from Kingston Pike. And the newer sidewalks that we've built in the town are both wider and have more separation than they've ever had in the past. We really try, unless there's a topographical challenge, we really try to avoid putting the sidewalks right on the road. Like over at Concord Road, we didn't really have a choice because of the topography, so the sidewalks are right on the edge of the asphalt.
Well, that's where we have the Kingston Pike right by, what's that, Wentworth, right in that area, the sidewalk is right on.
Well, you got the little sinkhole that's back there at the Wentworth townhomes, and so you had some challenges but probably if we designed that today, we'd probably allow the sidewalk to come up against Kingston Pike where the little drainage area is, or sinkhole, and then maybe the other areas we try to get some more separation away from Kingston Pike, just to let people feel a little bit more comfortable, because there's no doubt when you're walking down Kingston Pike and you're only 3 or 4 feet away from traffic, it's a little nerve-wracking.
Well, I recommend Noah be appointed to the planning commission until Kingston Pike is built out.
Oh, hopefully I got enough years in me that I can make it that long.
In perpetuity.
Thank you.
Developer who doesn't think
I
the
mean,
way we do.
Costco's pedestrian facilities are the ideal, where you got a walking trail that's really separated from Kingston Pike. That's with landscape in between.
Is that addressed in our landscaping plan, or how is the green space addressed is it in our landscaping plan? Is it in our architectural design guidelines? Where is that?
Well, we have a requirement that you must have 2.5 feet times the circumference, if I'm using the correct word, of the building is your total square footage of landscaping that you must have between parking facilities and the building.
Okay.
And then, but this is a little bit different, talking about the building being pushed closer to Kingston Pike, not having the parking lot separating the building from Kingston Pike. But by default, you're going to have a green area due to the fact that the building can get no closer than 20 feet from the edge of the right-of-way. And you also have impervious surface requirements that would preclude somebody from going out there and just making one giant concrete sidewalk between the building and Kingston Pike.
Okay.
So I think we have enough meat in our ordinance to be able to address that. And then one of the other things that Mark has added with this, which I completely support, it was something that we had borrowed from the BD-4, is that in the event that you just can't take your parking lot and put it behind your building, then we have some screening requirements to help de-emphasize the parking lot. If you are going to build the traditional strip mall way, which is good, bad, or indifferent, it is what it is, then we have some requirements that that parking lot can be screened, and requirement to be screened either by landscaping or by some berms. And that's taken right out of the BD-4, which I think is some really good language in there. Again, what we're really trying to do is dangle a carrot in front of somebody and try to get a civil designer or a good land planner to be able to think outside the box.
So just give me, because I'm very visual, take the property that Anytime Fitness is in.
Mm-hmm.
If that were built today, you would require a berm built in that.
Well, it wouldn't necessarily have to be a berm. It could be like the Southeast Bank building, where we have a requirement. Is it 60%?
Yeah.
So basically 60% of the parking lot, and that's measured along the front distance, the frontage along Kingston Pike. And what you could do there is in the Southeast Bank hedge is coming right along. It's still young, but you can see these. There's a serpentine hedge that's going through there. It's not quite filled in yet, but it will fill in. It's actually grown a ton in the last year. But yeah, so the only difference that you would have over there is to have some screening, and the idea is not to screen the building. We still want the businesses to be promoted and their signage to be promoted, but we want to de-emphasize the sea of asphalt.
Yep. Okay. Although I have to say, I think Southeast Bank's parking lot is so beautiful because of the the
Pavers,
pavers,
yeah.
that I hate to see that blocked off, because it really is.
I agree. It is a gorgeous parking lot.
um,
Can't have everything.
Anybody else have anything on that, or does all the other language make sense? Or?
It's based on the section XX, paragraph A, subparagraph 5, section I.
Wait a minute.
Basically, the changes there is islands not less than 7.5 feet. Is that the only change to that paragraph that this body is supporting?
Interior islands not less than 7.5 feet. Yeah. You just want to limit those to interior islands, not terminal.
Yes, leave our terminal language alone.
Okay.
And I think that's going to help with exactly what you're talking about.
That'll help
Trees is what breaks up a parking lot.
Yeah.
I mean, really, when we've had folks throw in river rock or little shrubs or monkey grass or whatever, it's the trees that actually break it up, and I think that's what we need to encourage.
Really, it gives the developer more bang for their buck. If they're going to pay money for these trees, you might as well put them in a setting where they have a good chance for survival. So it's.
I agree.
I thought you said you were changing that or removing the change from 15 to 10.
So it's
Yeah,
gonna
we'll leave
stay-
it as 15.
Leave it as 15.
Yeah, we'll leave all that same.
And we'll
only
leave the
thing-
20, 10.
Yeah, we'll leave that.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna leave that. We're just changing now. Our minimum interior island size is 7.5 feet.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Leaving everything else as is, in
Yeah.
other words.
Right. Yeah. That's right. Anything else?
Is the last sentence there, though, to remain?
Yeah, well, I added that again, just again thinking about this
Yeah.
a little bit. If you've got a bioswale, you know, where you want to actually not have continuous curbing, you want to encourage the water to go into your island rather than out into your parking lot, then that just gives them some language that would allow that.
Okay.
Well, probably the only thing we really didn't, as far as the commission, talk about was the regional commercial, or R-2, C-2, and want to make sure everybody's on board with that. So we're really talking about 3 zoning districts that we're having pretty significant changes to them, both with the front setbacks, some low-impact development requirements, and a little modification we did to the parking. But it'd be 3 commercially oriented zoning districts that we're dealing with.
Are the height requirements for all of them the same, C101?
No, I think C-2 might have a 50.
Yeah.
Okay, how do we address that in the C2? I don't know.
Well,
that I
yeah,
wanna
you have
fix-
to set the building back further.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's right.
So
that's
basically, if
right,
anything
yeah.
over 35 feet, you got to
Yeah,
do the
1 foot,
1-to-1
yeah.
on the C2.
Yeah.
And Mark can just copy and paste that language out of the
Okay.
out of the
I know
BD-4.
we talked about that in the first part. It's been a while.
Oh, you want that language in there with that formula? in
For the
C2?
C-2? Yeah, so basically anything over 30 basically it would, if you're between 35 and the maximum in a C-2 of 50, if you go all the way to a 50, you'd be at a 35-foot setback. You'd be the 20 plus the 1-to-1, which is
That's right.
20 plus 15 is 35. So I'm sorry it's getting late.
So-
I've got a 7 o'clock flight out in the morning, so
Oh.
in interest of time, if you guys don't have any more questions, I will finish our agenda item and we'll move to the next item.
With that setback, did we want to also include the minimum 75 setback to C2? And then that would increase one.
Minimum what?
Microphone,
Building height,
Eddie.
75, 55, and 35.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So are we only going to include these other buildings, or just anything over 35 feet? And the setback is 1 foot.
Yeah, right, yeah, all right, yeah. That'd be the same language, just if it's over 35 feet, you have to set the building back a foot for each foot over 35 feet in height.
But you still have a maximum of 50. I think what Miss Betty was
Yeah.
talking about are those traditional setbacks, the 75 and the 55 and the C-2. I think we would leave those alone and just add the 20 based on that carrot that we're going to dangle out there for somebody that wants to jump through some additional hoops to be able to do the 20-foot setback.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the other setbacks would be the same.
Right.
Anything else? All right, we'll put that in an ordinance and send it to you next time.
Good enough. I think we got sufficiently good guidance to finish that one up, Mark.
You did want the formula from the BD4, or just use the 1-to-1 ratio of the setback that's in the C2
I thought we had that
currently?
already in BD-4. I thought we had it if it was over 35 feet.
Yeah,
From
it might
35
be. But the bottom line is you want to retain the language of a 1-foot setback for each foot you go
You know
above
what? I bet if
35.
Ed St. Clair was here, he would definitely want that language in there. Because he has a real concern about that, and I understand that. So I think it would be consistent with their other zoning to have that in the C-2. Anything over 35 feet, you got to start doing the 1-to-1 setback.
Yeah, that's in there now. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think just using the 1-to-1 setback is, plus with our architectural design standards, which we didn't have when we wrote the BD4, I think is an additional
I'm fine with that.
measure
I think that
we
makes
can
sense.
apply
And
those things.
It's actually a lot easier
It's
to
simpler.
apply.
Yeah, it's
having the
simpler.
edge of right of way versus because you might have some areas where the street meanders a little bit in the right of way.
Yeah.
Street edge.
Yeah, it's a little. Yeah, I'd rather just keep it from consistent with where you measure it from. All right.
Okay, we're ready to get on to the most interesting item on the.
Hey, for some beer.
Brought samples.
Well, I don't know whether we can get free samples anymore. All of our dealers got penalized the other day, so.
Good evening, I'm Steve Dedman. I'm 615 Augustine Lane here in Farragut. Have 3 of my 4 other partners here with me. And quite simply, we want to introduce into ordinance language allowing for commercial craft breweries in Farragut. And I think you've all seen the packet that I sent in. We're all Farragut residents. We want to live, work, do our business in Farragut. We are currently, we're home brewers. We want to take it to the next level. We're award-winning home brewers. We've never failed to place one of our beers in any competition we've been to. So basically, we want to be a town center for Farragut. We want to be a catalyst for development for downtown Farragut. We want to locate in downtown Farragut if at all possible. We want to be able to bring in our clients from Halls, Hardin Valley, Loudon, Maryville, Cedar Bluff, and those people are all going to come here and they're going to want to spend money in Farragut. I just today received some figures regarding tax impact of brewery. To give you a little bit of background, Tennessee has got the highest per barrel distribution tax in the United States, $35 per barrel, barrel being 31 gallons. If we produce 1,000 barrels of beer in 1 year, then that's $35,000 in tax we're going to pay. 97% of that tax comes back to the municipality. In terms of sales tax, that's about $111,000 in sales tax at a $5 a pint rate if we sell that by the pint. A good portion of that, of course it's all convoluted going through the county and through the state and everything, but a good portion of that is going to come back to the town of Farragut. And you know, the slide you got up there, how much craft beer does contribute to the local economies. A gentleman recently did an article in the Atlantic, and he talked about cities that are on the comeback or are on the rise, and he gave 11 different characteristics of those cities. One of those 11 characteristics was that they have craft breweries. We want to be a benefit to Farragut, and I'll take any of your questions.
The location in mind?
For the size of brewery that we want to do, which is a 15-barrel brewery, we're going to have to locate in one of the larger commercial spots down here. There's only a handful available, and when you start layering in different leases, different lease clauses, the number starts dwindling even more. We would like to try to peel the old Kroger onion and try to get into that space if we can subdivide it. We have looked at the old Blue Ridge Mountain space, which is ideal for us, but we don't know if we'll be able to get around Fresh Market's leasing clauses. And then the old Goodies is another possibility if we can get Ingalls to work with us on it. But we're looking at preferably around a 10,000 square foot facility. And
What does that mean when you say 15-barrel brewery, 15 barrels?
15-barrel brew house will be able to produce 15 barrels at a time, barrel being 31 gallons.
And the time is over a month, a week, or what?
We would, that's the best way to put it, we would brew a batch, which would take a day, goes into the fermenters for a couple of weeks, and then anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks, then it's able to be packaged, served, distributed, however we do that, whether it's in kegs to restaurants, whether it's in pints in our tasting room. So.
And how often can you brew a batch and then you put it in your, I don't know anything about this process. I don't know how long
Okay.
it takes. So you obviously taking up space while you're fermenting.
Oh, yeah.
How is that all filled at that one point and then you can't use any more? You don't
What we'll have, we plan on having 6 fermenters, which means we'll be able to have 6 different beers going at a time in the fermenters. There's typically a 2-week turnaround in the fermenters. So, you know, when you say how much space is that going to take up, each one of the fermenters is probably about a 6x6 area. So 36 times 6. I'm sorry, the math isn't.
Yeah.
So that's about how much space we're going to have in fermenters. The brew house itself will be about 300 square feet. And then you're going to have a lot of grain storage, a lot of cooperage storage for the kegs, chemical storage, all sorts of different storages that we have to have, and they all have to be segregated. So
How volatile are the chemicals and the grain? And
generally not very.
what's the most volatile part of the process, I guess, is what I would.
There really isn't. There really isn't one.
Okay.
I mean, it's 95, 98% water.
Okay, so there is not, but about heat, high heats, you're using?
We would have a steam boiler, which of course, you know, there's all kinds of state ordinances on state laws on that, how those have to be installed, taken care of, inspected. So we'd be covered there.
And do the buildings require different kinds of fire protection because of, on top of the steam boiler and all the?
No. It's all low pressure steam boiler.
Okay.
Who regulates this? Is it the state? Is it us?
Yes.
Is it?
Well, it depends on what portion of it you're talking about. There's a lot of layers to this. There's a federal layer, there's a state layer, there's a local layer. The federal layer, of course, Uncle Sam wants his cut of what we make, and that comes under the Tax and Trade Bureau. The state has their regulations with their inspections of the facility, including the boiler. The state takes care of that. In terms of the local authority, that's generally in terms of your beer board, regulating, sales and all those things that come under the beer ordinances. It's typically how that's handled.
I know little about this operation either. How does it differ from the Smoky Mountain Brewery Calhoun's operation?
Very little, actually. They are a craft brewer. That's what we want to do.
Okay.
The difference is we want to be local in the Central Business District of Farragut. We want to be a source of pride for the town of Farragut. We want to be a place where people come together and they meet at the brewery, they have a beer or two, and they enjoy themselves.
So you'll be a competitor of theirs, right?
Yes.
Do you intend to serve food as they do also?
We do not intend to serve food ourselves. The way we want to address that is 3 different ways. First is we'd like to have guest chefs come in from time to time. They have their equipment, they bring it in, they set it up, and they actually cook the meal. The second way is occasionally having caterers come in. But the main way that we plan to address that is we're going to have menus from every restaurant in the town of Farragut in our brewery. We've already been in discussion with one local restaurant that has agreed to create a special menu for the brewery at a discounted price that they will deliver to the brewery. All the people have to do is call and say, this is what I want, and it shows up there. They pay for it. And most of the time, they're probably going to be able to get it there quicker than I could get it out of a kitchen. So that's...
Well, isn't there a requirement that, or does this fall under that requirement to the alcohol regulations that you have to serve food?
We already changed that for
For tavern use.
Yeah, and I must say,
Okay.
that's been a
Just have a
problem.
40% rule that your alcohol couldn't exceed 40% of your gross sales or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Actually, it's created a problem with
Yeah.
these food trucks and things that aren't allowed currently in the town. And maybe they should be, I don't know, but it's created a problem by them not having food provided in the facility, like Smoky Mountain Brewery does. So that is something to think about with this. I'm not saying I'm against it, but it has created problems with one of our other taverns in the town. And this is different from the taverns that we currently provide for. This would require an amendment to the beer ordinance too.
Yeah.
But the taverns that we provide for don't manufacture the beer in the area. That's he's asking to basically be able to manufacture beer in our commercial
But if the
zoning.
consumption's on site, that's a different matter.
It could be, yes, you can have consumption on site. They also would have distribution off site, which again is not necessarily a problem. I'm just trying to show you how it differs from what we currently allow. Taverns are also limited to 3,000 square feet. We only have 3 allowed in the town, and we already have exhausted that. We already have our 3, so that'd have to be.
But that's
have
not,
to be
that's not
amended.
carved in stone.
No, it's
well,
not. It's
to be
not.
quite frankly, I think this is apples and oranges from a tavern, and I think it needs to be
is.
addressed differently.
It is.
It is, for lack of a better word, a little more industrial
Yeah,
in
it
appearance, which to me is not a bad thing. I mean, I'd love to drive down Kingston Pike and see, a wall of glass and these big vats
Yeah,
that are, especially pulled up closer to Kingston Pike. I think that'd be really cool for the town. You see that in a lot of really progressive communities, but it is. I think I think this deserves creating something from scratch,
It would
not
be.
trying to shoehorn
Yeah.
the tavern ordinance that we did a number of years ago and trying to make that work. So I think this is something. There's kind of 2 proposals here, and one's for the brew pub, and then one is for the craft brewery. And Steve, why don't you explain what your interpretation is of the difference between the 2?
Okay. A brew pub is Smoky Mountain Brewery. They manufacture beer, they create, sell food on site. A craft brewery only manufactures the beer. But they may have a tasting room, other amenities on site. But
do they normally have a brewery? Would they normally have a bar where you'd go hang out and watch a football game? I mean,
Yeah.
Okay, so that is
yeah, the
okay.
tasting room.
But that's part of the tasting room. So I guess
Yes.
when I think of a tasting room, I'm thinking, little sips of different things. You come and go. But a tasting
No.
room could be something that is more kind of a bar oriented where you hang out for a while.
Right.
Okay.
Mark, can you pull up some of the pictures that I've got there? Particularly, I believe
I
it's.
think I've got any pictures in this.
Did I not send you
This
the
is
pictures?
one that you gave.
We do have a few pictures.
You've
that-
got some
that's
pictures
in our
there.
packet.
We put it
Yeah.
in their packet. Yeah, they do
Yeah.
have that.
And if you look at the one that's labeled Twin Leaf Brewing.
Well, you got one that's called figure. Do you remember a figure number on it?
Uh,
You got it.
It should be a page there that's got the figure numbers.
Yeah, he's got a master.
Wait, what you called it? It was what brewing?
Oh, there.
Twin Leaf.
figure
That's
13.
Fig 13.
Yeah.
Okay, that has like a foosball table and,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, and now something to note there. You see the tanks in the background there. By federal law, that has to be segregated from the public areas of the brewery, which they've got about a 3-4 foot wall, so the general public isn't going back into the production areas.
Okay.
Now they can go back there if it's on an official tour. You can go and tour the brewery, but you've got an employee with them. They're not just back there wandering around.
Is that more for safety or for sanitation, or both?
Both.
Okay.
Both, yeah.
Health department, is the Knox County Health Department, do they regulate your sanitation side of things?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, even on the brewery, not just the brew pub? Okay,
Yeah,
okay. Okay.
yeah. And we're subject to all the same requirements as far as sinks and drainage and
Right.
all that.
I think the way this needs to proceed is, probably this board right now is not the right venue for us to be talking about it. Because I don't think we have the words in all of our rules and everything that cover this yet. So we need to get together, you and us and David Smoke, the town administrator, and just see how we're going to go through this.
Okay.
And that may take a little bit of time because we've got to, we'll have to talk to a lot of other people.
Sure.
But I suggest that we start there, and then at some point, you'll come before this board or the board of mayor and aldermen. That'll take a little time, but we ought to at least be talking right away.
Okay.
It would be nice if Steve could get a consensus. Is this something that this body,
Yeah,
which
that would be.
theoretically, tries to represent the town the best that we can, is this something that we embrace? Because he's going to need some marching orders at some point to know, is this worth his time to pursue?
I agree with that.
And so it might be kind of, and I'll be the first to volunteer my opinion, and it's just my opinion. I like this idea. I like it on a limited basis. I could never see the day where we would have 5 or 10 of these in the town, but I think of kind of North Knoxville and the old BP and kind of things happening on Central, and there's a couple that are popping up, and I think it's part of having a real desirable community. There's this huge amount of kind of explosion in craft beer. And people desire this. I think this is something that when folks are looking at our community, maybe more millennials that are looking at our community, something that's important to them, they would want to check off their box and say, yep, that town has one of those. And so I think it's kind of a marketing tool for us. And so I, for one, obviously, we have a lot of things to work through as far as size and all the other details, but I, for one, am a planning commissioner that definitely supports the idea of pursuing this further.
I like this idea as well. I do have a big concern about, with a brew pub, having food, some type of food, even if it's limited food, on property. It is a concern
too.
here. It may not be specific to other areas, but it seems to be a concern here. And I think that it's something that we need to really hash out and discuss.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that you can't stick with your concept of having the option of people, but I think that there should be some kind of,
I don't
and
like
know
the
how that
idea of it
looks.
being open-ended as to
Yeah.
whether you can or you can't have food. I think I'd prefer to see that food is required.
I'll give Steve and Ms. Roseanne a little bit of background. The reason why some of us may have some heartburn over this is we had one of our taverns come to us and said, gosh, I didn't put in a kitchen. I would like to have food trucks come park in my loading zone on a regular basis and serve my patrons food. And so we had an unintended consequence of removing the food requirement, and we never thought that would happen, but it did happen. And quite frankly, especially that craft beer, some of that craft beer is pretty heavy-duty beer, and you probably need something else on your stomach instead of just drinking this heavy-duty beer, and maybe it's high gravity or whatever, but it's not like drinking Corona Light for me, which is no big deal, but I go drink any one of these craft beers, and one 16-ounce glass, and I feel woozy. So I feel like that food, to me, should be an important part of whatever that we embrace here in the town of Farragut. I hope that ties in with what your plans are to some degree. And we're not necessarily talking about a full kitchen with a fryer, but something where you have a few items on the menu, whether it's paninis or something. But I do think your patrons need food, and I think that probably goes in with some of the tradition that this town has, where there was a reason why 36 years ago we didn't necessarily want just a bar. We wanted a bar to serve some food, and I think that once we removed that, we had some unintended consequences where we had the tavern owner come back to us and say, gosh, I wish that I served food. So anyway, with that being said, I'm kind of leaning more towards developing something for a brew pub than I am a brewery.
One of the other ideas behind, it's a happy coincidence for us that it dovetails with what our philosophy is, but my thinking is that in having the venues and the delivery available from other restaurants in Farragut, that drives business for them as well.
But see, the issue is we have that already, and it's not, it's in theory, it seemed like a good idea, but it's not working in practice, and that's my concern. And I think this is a great idea. I think this is something that I would love to see us work through, but that is my sticking point. It's I don't think it's enough that you offer that ability, because we already have that, and it's been an issue. So
is it an issue of not wanting a kitchen and
dealing with
cooling
that
and stuff, where you could just have chips and snacks and that don't need to be cooked or fried or whatever? Is there something like that?
Well, there's several layers of it. The equipment cost.
Yeah.
And I have managed a restaurant bar before, and that is a completely different set of headaches from running a brewery. And having both sets of headaches is not great, not really appealing. But that's not to say that it's a deal breaker. But
I would say the P's and Q's, they don't even have a full kitchen.
They have a very small kitchen. They do have a 3-compartment sink, a panini press, and they do probably about a half a dozen different little rotation items. That is, it's a step above, putting your hands in a bowl of peanuts. It's not as simple as that. So, but it's not a full-blown kitchen where you can order a burger and fries either. And it actually works really well for PCQs. There's just enough where you feel like that, I just want something on my stomach. And quite frankly, and maybe I'm getting old, but quite frankly, I can't just sit there and just drink beer. I want to munch on something, and I think that's pretty typical. From people that I hear that go to a couple of the different taverns here in town, they like to have something available. And both of those taverns that I'm talking about, both have tried partnering with restaurants and having a menu where you could deliver things, and it sounded great in philosophy, but it really didn't work in practice. And because you get some guy with deer in the headlights that walks in the door and he's holding a pizza and he doesn't know where to go, and then somebody else is trying to say, well, do you take a credit card, or can I use the app on my phone? And it really doesn't work as well as what we'd hope it would work. And the food trucks was kind of a cool idea, but the site was never designed for food trucks. And so it really, the food trucks created all sorts of safety issues, kids run across the parking lot, blocking the fire zones and all sorts of things. So we realized that having a food component is important. The P's and Q's, their menu is a small menu, but it's just enough to keep people reasonably satisfied, and also to keep it just from turning it just to a bar where you're just hanging out all day drinking.
Yeah.
I was going to ask what the hours would be, if you thought about that.
We've got a slide that's got that.
It's right here.
Yeah, and the most important thing is the last point on there. We're not going to be a late night watering hole. We work hard to create high quality craft beers, and we don't want people that are drunk enough that they can't enjoy them. that they can't appreciate what we put into the beers. We want people that are going to sample the beers, enjoy themselves for a little while, and go along their way. We don't, and, you know, as you know, it's against the law to serve somebody that's drunk, and we're not going to do that, so.
I love the idea of taking over some of these buildings that we've been struggling to, you know, find a resident for. And I like the idea, and I think it should be pursued in one way, shape, or form. So it might, like, you know, Mayor Ralph says, it might take a little while, but I think it's worth, definitely worth, because it does will bring in millennials. Maybe be that one little nugget of something that might make people from Bearden and downtown area want to come out here to East Nashville, as I've been told it would been called.
It's interesting you mentioned that. The gentleman I've been consulting with here, this is Sam Singletary. He's going to be our contractor, and he's contracted on several of the downtown breweries, and he and his partner actually have done some legwork on figuring out how far somebody's willing to go to get a craft beer. And what they discovered is that once you get west of Cedar Bluff, people aren't going to drive downtown to the breweries to go to the breweries. They'll come out here. In a heartbeat, they'll come out here, and they'll bring a lot of money.
I'm in favor of pursuing it because for that very reason, I think it will be increase the revenue in Farragut. But I've got one other question for you. I don't think I read a thing in here about entertainment. Yet figure 11, I have yet to figure out what all these people are doing there. Have you got any visions of entertainment of any sort in this
Sure.
place?
We'll have music inside, obviously. Like
loud music.
Well, hopefully if we're going to locate in one of these buildings downtown, you're not going to be able to hear it over the Kingston Pike traffic.
P's and Q's has their band outside, and I can hear it from my house, and it doesn't bother me a whit because I know somebody's doing business in our town, and that makes me happy.
We'll also have different kinds of games. We have a giant Jenga made out of 2x4s, things like that. Just
any shuffleboard, maybe.
Possibly,
is
yeah.
the space available to rent for parties and things like that, or is it?
We would try to
That's
design it in
or-
such a way where we would have a flexible space to where this area over here, we're going to have a private party. Or, you know, a smaller area over here that maybe takes a
An
smaller
event
private
space.
party.
Yeah, an event space, right.
Yeah, and we'll have it configurable different ways. So.
How much of the 10,000 square feet that you mentioned would be taken up by your operation, your brewery operation?
The actual fermentation and brewing space typically is about a third of the space.
Okay.
In most breweries, it's between a third and half of the space.
Well, that means you got quite a bit to work with then,
Yes.
otherwise.
Have you talked with the owners of the three places you suggested?
We, at this point, let me give you a little, we do have a commercial real estate broker, and we're actually we've actually been kind of holding a little bit for tonight to see what happens here. Like I said, we're going to look at the old Kroger. We have sent a petition to Fresh Market Corporate in Greensboro to get a waiver for their lease clauses that would allow us to go into Blue Ridge Mountain Spot. I don't know if you're familiar with it. The Fresh Market has restrictive clauses in their lease against any craft beer sales or food sales not currently existing when they went into that place. So that Blue Ridge Mountain space, if you look at it, that was designed as a restaurant. That was designed to be a restaurant, but a restaurant can't go in there because of that lease. We are attempting to get an audience with the Vice President of Property for Fresh Market Corporate in Greensboro. Unfortunately, 2 months ago, Fresh Market Corporate was sold to a hedge fund in New York. And so I don't know if who was on the website as their Vice President of Property yesterday is their Vice President of Property today.
Hollow bought it.
Yeah. And so it's my understanding there's been quite a bit of turmoil in their corporate office over there. But we're going to try to get in front of them and get the waiver for that space. I have talked to Mary at Goody, at Ingalls, about the former Goody space. They have some concerns because they sell a lot of craft beer in their store, and they're concerned that we're going to take sales away from them. My contention is it's going to be exactly the opposite. We're going to drive sales to them. People will come into our brewery that have not maybe had an IPA, an India Pale Ale, and they're going to say, hey, this is a really good beer, and then they're going to be in Ingalls, and they're going to say, hey, I like that one next door. Why don't I try this one here? So I think there's a really different mindset that comes from the craft beer culture that it's not really, it doesn't really nicely fit into the old scheme of the way competition and things like that work. You asked me if Smoky Mountain is a competitor. They are, in the general sense, yes, they are, but they're also a partner with us. Any craft brewer is, and any craft brewer will tell you, yes, the more craft beer you get into a place, the better, because that means that people are getting acclimated to it, and they're going to keep trying it.
If they can't get into your place, they'll go to theirs, right?
Yep, that's right.
Well,
Anybody else?
I encourage you to try to get a time with us. Now, I and the town administrator are going to be in Las Vegas all of next week, recruiting businesses.
Okay.
So if you call town hall, see if they can get us together the following week, if you can make that.
It would be the last week of May.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll start there and just try to figure out what it is we do have to do.
Okay.
To make this happen.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I
Steve.
think you found
Thanks.
some positive support for you that
I did. I did.
we
That's
might
wonderful.
actually be able to figure this out.
I think we can.
All right.
Did we have I assume we had a consensus of support here?
I think so.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Have no utilities, so we are finished.
Oh, thank you, Mark.
Right now, I could use a beer.
So is
No.
today.
Okay, last item is public hearing on a proposed location for new utilities, and
Said we have no
none.
utilities.
Meeting is now adjourned. I dictate.